Hello and welcome to Timeline Astrology, and these are the sign-based forecasts for December 2021. So before we jump into this and I look at each of these signs individually, please make sure that you know your sidereal rising sign, or failing that, your moon sign. And it's good to have both rising sign and moon sign to keep a close eye on both of these. You can also add your sun sign, but remember, it's the sidereal zodiac I'm referring to now. So everything gets shifted back 23 or 24 degrees from tropical calculations. So most of the time, that means that the sign is the previous one to your tropical sign, most of the time. But because it's 23 or 24 degrees, there's either a 6 or 7 degree overlap. And so sometimes if you have a planet, your rising sign or moon or sun at the end of a tropical sign, it will simply go back to the beginning of that sign. And we use mostly whole sign houses in Indian astrology. And this is what I'll be referring to here for this forecast. So let's get straight into it and let's look at Aries. So Aries, your ruling planet is Mars, and Mars is in Libra, and it has been for the last few weeks. And this is quite a bit of a challenge in many ways because it pits you against the other. Libra is not the easiest environment for Mars because Mars is all about action and self-oriented action and being proactive. And really, Mars in Libra is not able to be proactive because Libra is all about the other. It's all about compromise. So this, might have challenged you to be more compromising in your relations, Aries. You might have been forced to think about what others are feeling, and you might have had to put off whatever personal actions you had wished to take for the last some weeks. Now, this is about to change in a big way in December because Mars will move into Scorpio, its own sign. The other sign it rules, of course, it rules your sign, but it rules your 8th sign also. So it shows, Aries, that you have this quite intense dynamic between the 1st and the 8th house, and it being Mars, showing this kind of intense need to really dig deep and to understand things on a much deeper level, to investigate and research things, not to be satisfied with anything really on the surface level. And of course, this kind of penetrating, very precise and almost like laser-like ability is also accentuated by Ketu, the south node of the moon, which Mars will join in Scorpio in your 8th sign. Ketu is the eclipse point, and we have an eclipse on the 4th of December. So if I bring that up on the 4th, you'll see here that Mars is about to move into Scorpio, join the sun, moon for the new moon, and Mercury and the south node Ketu. So it's really putting a lot of emphasis, Aries, on your 8th sign in December. And this new moon and major reset point and this eclipse shows many possibilities. Now, one of the possibilities is that you can get a bit distorted in your thinking, and your perceptions could become somewhat distorted because it is an eclipse. And there could be some sort of maybe gloomy expectation or prediction on your part, or you might hear that from others. And really what it's asking you to do is to overcome these thoughts and feelings, to express them, to go there, as it were, but to also rise above that, or perhaps maybe more appropriately to dig deep within yourself to overcome those challenges, any kind of emotional challenges. Now, the 8th sign is very much about what you value and what the other person values, and those shared values. In other words, what you value is more the 2nd house, where the north node Rahu is placed, and what other people value, or what your partner or partners value, is the 8th house. It is also your in-laws, so your partner's family and your partner's wealth. And family and wealth and all of these things tie in with their values. But the eighth house is for you how you negotiate with other people and especially your partner around values. Now, this could literally be the case. So this new moon and solar eclipse shows a need to negotiate joint resources, any kind of money issues like that. Eighth house is also taxes and debts. So there might having to be kind of, you might have to deal with some of these issues as well. But it's a reset. It's a major reset in these areas of your life. The other thing the eighth house represents is intimacy, physical and emotional intimacy. So it's very important to really go within, check how you're feeling around this new moon, because new moons generally are a waning cycle. They generally feel sort of like withdrawn. But in terms of relating to others, this could be a very intimate time as well, if you allow it. If you don't allow the other side of the coin, the kind of fear-based expressions of Scorpio rise up, and they very easily could rise up. So that's something to be mindful of. So then Mars later on the day on the 4th or on the 5th, depending when you are, Mars is actually going to enter Scorpio. So it's in a much stronger position now, but it's also your 8th sign. So it's again, this area of having to negotiate with other people. And it could bring up some vulnerabilities and insecurities and changes, unexpected changes, especially. The 8th house is very much about change you hadn't planned for because you cannot see it. It's a hidden house. So it also represents, therefore, hidden aspects of your being. And of course, intimacy and sexuality is a big part of that, but as is, your money and your shared money. So these are things that you'll be looking at a lot in the coming weeks. Now, Mars is conjoined Ketu, the south node, and that is exact on the 14th. So really, we've got one thing after another in December, with Mars triggering many things here in Scorpio. So for you, Aries, just be mindful all month from this eclipse right through the end of the month, when Mars then actually transits the eclipse degree. So the eclipse degree is 18 degrees, so Mars will make it to 18 degrees by December 30th. So it's important that you don't obviously react too strongly, especially if there are things that you might feel like you're not willing to negotiate. You're not willing to, whatever it is, with your partner or with any other, in fact. For example, if it was a business negotiation and that they have been revealed to have been doing X, Y, or Z, or they say X, Y, and Z now, whereas before you didn't realize that, you could easily get triggered. So I would say just be very mindful and step back a bit from it, and to be a bit more open-minded and lean into the uncertainty a bit more. Eclipses are generally more uncertain because of the changes that are happening, and we sense the change, but we don't necessarily know where it's going or what it's going to lead to. So that's just something to be mindful of in general. Now, Venus, which is your 7th lord, is about to move into Cancer and join Pluto, and this adds another dynamic in the month, but also into January, because Venus will retrograde and then go back into Sagittarius, and then it'll go back into Capricorn in February, and then conjoin Pluto again in March. So basically, really from now until the end of the spring, heading into the spring next year, we have this Venus-Pluto theme, this story of Venus and Pluto. Venus, your partner, your wealth, your values, conjoined with Pluto, the modern day ruler of Scorpio, and all of those Scorpio themes that I mentioned, means that you and your partner are really going to be going through it for the next few months in terms of hashing things out. There might be a lot of power struggles. There might be a lot of things to negotiate that you are not really comfortable with always. You might be even feeling attracted to things or people even that you're not normally, or things that you value perhaps might be in some way denied you even, like the simple pleasures in life, in terms of maybe over Christmas not getting the very thing that you want, and these kinds of things. Venus-Pluto combinations can show that kind of loss of those kinds of very tangible things, but actually it's pointing to something deeper and more profound and intangible values. So obviously it's worth checking with what it is that you really value beyond the physical stuff at Christmas, beyond the bling of Christmas. And because they're coming together exactly on Christmas Day, on December 25th, and because Venus is going to begin to retrograde on the 19th before that, so they come together as Venus backtracks. There's a lot to work out here with you and your partner and your wealth. So there's a lot of financial issues to figure out in the next few weeks. So take your time with it, because as you're going through this process, it's like Venus going through this combustion, it's retrograde, and the story of Venus or Persephone is the story it's given in the Greek myth, and Hades taking Persephone down into the underworld. And that's the story of Venus going into the underworld and coming and re-emerging, as it will do in the new year, as the morning star. So at the moment it's the evening star, and then it goes into the morning star. So I think it's a time to be very cautious in your relationships, not fearful, cautious and considerate and appreciative of the simple pleasures, the simple things in life. And by doing so, I think you will have a better time with your partner. Things will work out much more smoothly, I think. And there's nothing to worry about here. So that's Venus and Pluto. It's another main story. You can see here the moon has joined on the 8th, the 7th and 8th. Now, the next story to say is that Jupiter is in Aquarius, and it has just moved in, and it will remain here for the next few months until April next year. So it's really accentuating, expanding, growing, deepening your awareness of what it is that you want to do long term. What are your long-term objectives and ambitions? That's the 11th sign. So it's really getting you to focus on what is giving your life meaning in the long term. What would you like to do in any instance, and what would you wish to gain from doing that? It can be a bit confusing what that actually is. It might have been confusing for the last many years because of Neptune's transit for now nearly 14 years in Aquarius. And now that Jupiter's joined Neptune, this could add to the kind of lack of clarity around your vision, basically. So it's important, obviously, therefore, to get clear, and you will get clear, of course, because Saturn will move in here next month, or next year. So this is a great opportunity to, look at what it is that you want to achieve long term, and to get clear about that. It's like Neptune is like the fog on the lens of the camera, or the kind of out of focus on the camera that is just slightly off. And that in one way can give you a great sense of possibility, because anything is possible. You can't really see the definition, but in another way there's no clarity around it. And that's what Saturn is here to do for the next few years. So Saturn will move in next summer, and then also retreat back, but then go back in again January 2023. So big theme here for the coming months and years, in fact, is what is it that you want to do long term? What do you wish to gain? What are your biggest hopes and dreams and aspirations? So one other thing I want to mention, and if I bring it forward, is this formation that occurs as soon as Mars and Ketu meet on the 14th. Now, Venus and Pluto are together on the 14th. Mars and Ketu are together on the 14th. And that means all the planets are now moving over to one side of the nodes in your 2nd and 8th house. And again, 2nd and 8th house is very much about values and money and resources, and yours and theirs. So if you're in any way kind of dealing with your partner's resources, values, wealth, or any other person's in any kind of negotiation or business contract, this is something to be mindful of for the next few months, because they're going to create this Kala Sarpa Yoga. It's called this serpent of time until next April. So there can be, you might sense that things are a bit lopsided in your life, that, this is really taking a lot of attention, these issues, and that your life is a bit sort of lopsided. And all of the planets on this side in these houses from the 8th to the 2nd is definitely more about emphasis on your public life and your work and all of these things, as opposed to more private life, which obviously, to find more balance, you'll have to have more downtime and enjoy some time alone and relations and all of that, as opposed to really focusing all on work all the time. So that's something to be mindful of, but that's over many months until April. So what else do I want to say, Aries, for the month of December? I think the next thing to mention is, of course, there is that Mars-Ketu conjunction to be mindful of on the 14th and 15th. Just be mindful of, again, your reactions, and slow down, I would say. I'm not saying that in any way to kind of put fear in your mind, because you have to do what you have to do. You have to take actions. That's what you're about, Aries. But actions that are very impulsive or irrational and reactive and knee-jerk in any way will probably not work out very well, because this kind of combination suggests that on the one hand, but it also can show the problems coming from that, especially in the 8th house. So just try not to overreact to situations, is what I'm saying, especially around mid-month. So let me move it forward again. You can see the moon is going through your sign at the time as well. So that's another kind of trigger in terms of your emotional nature, being triggered more. And then the moon reaches its fullness then on the 19th. So it's in Gemini, in your 3rd sign, and it's all about communication, and opposite the sun, which has now moved into your 9th sign. And this is all about how you think and how you express what you think and believe as well, more so. And of course, the sun in Sagittarius is the time of year, every year, that we think more about these kinds of things, about what we believe. And traditionally, of course, that means thinking about our beliefs, literally our religious beliefs. But in our modern era, we could maybe tie this more into who do we believe, because it seems like there's a lot of different opinions always. And that's what Gemini is all about, certainly. It's about you working it out for yourself. But the 9th sign, Sagittarius, is also about being guided in some way, having a mentor or teacher, or any advice from anyone, really, is the 9th sign. So of course, this full moon is about getting the balance right between what you think and what other people have to tell you, and what you think and what you believe as well. Which, of course, you might say thinking then eventually comes your beliefs. Of course it does, but there is also a need to balance these two extreme areas, this lower mind, Gemini, and the higher mind, Sagittarius. So that's the full moon on the 19th. I'm going to move it forward, and actually just on the 19th, I meant to say that is also the day that Mercury stations retrograde. And again, because this is a very important planet for you in terms of your relationships and your family and money issues and all of these things that you've been dealing with now for some time, and it's stationing in your 10th sign initially in your work space, and going back into your 9th sign for most of its retrograde, and thinking about what it is that's important to you and what's meaningful in anything you're doing, beyond just making money. And how does that impact your partner also? And what does your partner believe is important? All of these things will be thrashed out during this whole period of Venus retrograde. For the few weeks that it's retrograde until the end of January, it's very much about you reevaluating, all of the things that are important, valuable to you. So that's on the 19th, and that continues, like I said, to the end of January, January 29th. So then the moon then wanes, and it will be waning all of the rest of the month. And I just wanted to point out the 30th to finish, and the 31st, because you can see here that by that stage, Mars has reached the eclipse degree. And it just so happens that the moon has joined Mars and the South Node once again to really trigger things for New Year's Eve. I would say, that for you, Aries, of course, this is again your 8th sign. So being very mindful of getting triggered in any way, because you can't predict what other people are thinking or feeling, or your partner is thinking or feeling. And this could be a potential sort of, how would I say, Mars tends to like set a match to an already perhaps explosive situation. So if there is an explosive situation going on with you and your partner, or you or any other, please be mindful of it around New Year's Eve, because it could really blow up. And as long as you're mindful of that, then you can just keep your reactions just under the radar, so that you can still, deal with the issues, but that, exploding on someone is not necessarily going to solve the issues. It might just create more issues. So that's something to be mindful of, especially now that Venus is also retrograde. And that tends to, bring at a time where, communication with your partner might not be so clear anyway. You're both reevaluating things, and, one or the other might feel unappreciated or not heard or anything like that. So when you mix in this Mars-Ketu moon combination of Scorpio in your 8th sign, this is just highly volatile, I would say, Aries. So just be mindful around the New Year's Eve mark. And so it is a complex month, Aries. There's no denying that. It's explosive in many ways. Hopefully, I hope that you experience it in a positive way in terms of using the energy and strength of Mars in Scorpio to overcome issues, to deal with issues, and, not to burn any bridges necessarily, but to be, clear about what your values are and what your dreams are long term, always keeping an eye on that Jupiter in the 11th. And so that you can continue to see that vision in your mind's eye and have that as a kind of marker if things kind of get a bit skewed at any point, if your emotions get wrapped up in what should be, a more clear and inspiring, and again, that kind of inner vision of Jupiter is that clarity, that inner clarity to move forward. So Aries, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Taurus, your ruling planet Venus is about to go retrograde in the month of December, on December 19th. It will do so in Sagittarius for most of the retrograde in January, but it will begin it in Capricorn. Now we're talking sidereal signs here, remember? So Capricorn is your 9th sign and going back into your 8th sign and spending most of the time in the 8th. Now, your ruling planet and the 6th lord of your chart, Taurus, is very much about everyday stuff, dealing with your everyday routines, work, and so on. And in the 8th sign, mostly in the 8th sign, remember, it's very much about negotiating with other people, negotiating unexpected turns, the many twists and turns that our life takes, of course. 8th sign is very much about unexpected change or any kind of obstacle. And the 8th sign is also about intimacy in a relationship. Of course, it represents physical and emotional intimacy. And the 8th sign in your chart is ruled by Jupiter, which is a very profound planet. It's awe-inspiring. There is a sense of needing to really connect with someone deeply to have any kind of meaningful exchange. And Venus, your ruler now, moving through the 8th and going back into the 8th by the end of December and into January, is a time to really reevaluate what is important to you and how you relate to others, and resolving any kind of conflicts in any kind of intimate relationship that you have. The 8th sign is also about joint resources. So it's whether you're jointly held resources with your partner or any partner, whether it's business, romantic, or any other. 8th sign is also money that you are not earned. So it's things like inheritance or grants and loans and things like that. It's also about debts, though, and taxes. So it's about money that is not necessarily just yours, that you earned yourself, that there's someone else involved in this. And you might say, well, all money is involving someone else, but 8th house is more so. So there's obviously a real need to kind of work some issues out here. And you're obviously, every time Venus goes retrograde, you're personally involved in this, like you're really invested in it. So if it's, for example, an emotional relationship, an intimate relationship you're embarking on, that you have some things to work out here, that Venus retrograde is about reevaluating things and how you engage. So here at Venus is on the 1st of December, it's at 26 degrees of Sagittarius, but it actually moves into Sagittarius soon after the new moon. So the new moon is on the 4th, and it's quite a special new moon in your 7th sign of the other. It's a new moon and a total solar eclipse. So it happens at 18 degrees of Scorpio. Mars, the ruler, is about to move in and join the south node. Mercury is quite closely conjunct the new moon as well. So there's a lot of activity going on in Scorpio in your 7th sign, with Rahu, the north node, in your 1st sign. And so there's a lot for you to work out in terms of how you relate to others, how you see yourself, and how you see your relationships. And of course, sometimes Ketu can show a neglect or rejection of others, especially if they're deemed not to be suitable or satisfying enough. And Ketu has this kind of this notion, it's a part of us all that has this kind of critical eye on, like maybe even an X-ray vision on a person. And if they don't live up to your standards, the standards of Ketu, you might on some level reject the person. However, you might not consciously be doing this, of course, and therefore you might actually sabotage the relationship in order to get out. And that's something just to be mindful of rejecting people, you know, based on maybe superficiality or anything like that, because Ketu cannot stand anything that's superficial. It's all about depth. And so if you're not having a deep conversation and a deep connection with someone and a very intimate connection with someone, it might, you know, not be satisfying. So this new moon and solar eclipse, you know, shows the mind, the possibility of the mind, and your desires as well, obscuring your happiness, because this is the moon obscuring the moon, your third and fourth lords. And so sometimes the third house is all about our sexual desires, but it's always about our selfish desires. And when it obscures the sun, which is about the fourth house and our happiness, sometimes we can actually make ourselves unhappy by going for things that we think we want, when really they're not actually going to make us happy. So this is just something to be mindful of for this new moon, that perhaps you are dealing with some of these issues now, thinking about what it is, what do I want? Who do I want? What would make me happy, or who would make me happy? And it's important around this eclipse on the 4th to kind of maybe just take your time with this, not to make any rash decisions. You don't have to. It might feel that way because eclipses often feel urgent, that a decision has to be made now, but that's not necessarily the case. So it's a good time to think about these things for sure, and think about who or what would make you happy, but not necessarily take any action on the day itself, just to dwell on them a bit. Now, of course, the moon is in Scorpio and it can be a bit gloomy. So it could also show, you know, a need to kind of, you know, have some pleasure and some engagement with some other to overcome any sense of gloominess. And that's valid. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, just checking with what is it that would actually truly make you happy beyond the kind of, you know, third house activity like sex, like whatever playfulness that you might engage in. So that's the 7th house new moon. It's an important new moon for you to reevaluate or reset, I should say, your relationships and a particular relationship. It's usually a significant other. Then on the 5th, we have Mars, your 7th house ruler, Scorpio, and your 12th house, bringing up some hidden dynamics in relationship and forcing them out into the open. And this is where, when Mars conjunct Ketu on the 14th and 15th of December, and then Mars conjunct the eclipse degree on the 31st of December, it means that really the whole of December is like pockmarked with all of these kinds of potential explosive engagements. So obviously, now that could be a very passionate thing, so that's great. But just be mindful of any kind of overreactive, irrational, knee-jerk reactions to someone. Someone triggering you in some way, in a big way, where you then burn your bridges. That's something to be mindful of, because Ketu tends to, again, reject the other in the 7th house. And Mars coming towards Ketu now is like explosive. So as long as you're not, or as long as you're mindful of not burning your bridges, being aware that this too shall pass, and once the storm's blown over and any kind of anger subsides, you might think then, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that thing, or I wish I hadn't said that or done that to that person. And so whatever kind of engagement, it obviously will play out more, especially with a romantic partner. But it could be anyone. It could be any kind of engagement, any other in the month of December. Just be mindful of that. Mars is very powerful in Scorpio, and it has the power to, you know, create this kind of explosive engagement. So what it's doing is actually asking you to be strong and to face up to issues as well, and to overcome issues with your partner or with another. So that's from the 5th of December. Then we have on the 8th, you can see here that Venus has moved into Capricorn, your ruler, and it's now joining Pluto, and it will be with Pluto for a few months, because Venus is going to station really just after it meets with Pluto, just within a degree. Then it will retrograde from the 19th of December, and then it will join Pluto again as it backtracks into Sagittarius, and it will continue to retrograde until the 29th of January. It then goes back into Sagittarius in February, and then by March, it's conjoined Pluto again. So there's a few months of this theme of Venus and Pluto. So your ruling planet conjunct Pluto, which in modern astrology rules Scorpio, your 7th sign. But we can just say that Pluto, taking aside the 7th sign, is going to show a lot of things for you to work out personally and in your relationships, and how that impacts your everyday life as well, which is the 6th house, and the other house Venus rules. So of course, the fact that Saturn has been aspecting your 6th house for, nearly 2 years now, Saturn in Capricorn, that is, Venus joining Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, and this aspect to Libra is really asking you, how do you live your day-to-day life, and how effective and efficient is it, and could it do with some improvement? And of course, this could also tie in with your partner or any partners. How would that improve your life? How would being with someone improve your life? How would being with someone new improve your life? And to think about these things a lot, because Venus conjunct Pluto can bring up a lot of hidden stuff, a lot of power struggles that you might not be aware of. And when we add in Ketu in the south, in the south node in the 7th sign, that's adding further to kind of hidden dynamics and potential kind of conflicts that aren't necessarily, even though Mars is here, is in the 7th sign, they still aren't necessarily going to be expressed outwardly by you or even the other. And then, so that's almost like worse, because then if all of these things are left unsaid, then it just festers and it builds up in the background. Because again, Venus, Pluto, that's a signature for the next few months. So there's a need to really look at yourself and how you're engaging with other people. And, again, mostly it's going to be in your 8th sign. So it's about intimacy. Again, joint resources, joint values. When you get with another person, the first thing you start discussing is what you value, and versus what I value. And do we have any shared values? That's the 8th sign. So there's a lot of potential there for really digging deep here and re-evaluating all of these things as the other person does the same. But again, starting in your 9th sign is about, well, what's more meaningful to me at this point? What kind of engagement, what kind of activity would be meaningful in my life right now? And then engaging with the other person and the other person's values. So that's Venus's journey from the 9th into the 8th and back into the 9th again, all the time close with Pluto as it's in the 9th. So that's Venus retrograde. Let me bring it to the 14th, 15th, and I'll show you how this is piling up now, or lining up now. You can see here, Mars and Ketu are both at 6 degrees, and Venus, your ruler, and Pluto are both at 1 degree of Capricorn. So there's a lot going on in terms of these kind of Scorpio themes, in other words. And because it's your 7th sign, again, this is all about relationship, and it's bringing something up from the depths. It might be bringing up some insecurities in you. It might be bringing up old stuff, old relationship issues that are coming to the surface again, because someone's triggering it again, either your old partner or a new partner, your current partner, whatever it is, it's bringing up some issues that need to be dealt with. And this whole month is really about, overcoming those issues and getting over them. Ultimately, that's what Mars is good at in Scorpio. It's about digging deep and finding the courage to get the emotional resilience and resolve to be able to deal with issues. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention as well before I go forward is the moon joining Jupiter and Neptune here in Aquarius, because this being your 10th house is very much about, and of course Mercury will move into Sagittarius, where Jupiter, which is the sign Jupiter rules. It's very much about, well, what am I doing in life? Where's my life going? What direction am I going in, especially in terms of career and status in the world? and wanting to be more inspired in what you're doing as well, with Neptune and Jupiter now coming together. And that inspiration can also maybe, tip over into a more extreme Neptune kind of fantasy world. But it could also, in the coming years, especially with Saturn moving through here from next year, become more real. So maybe there's a dream that you have about something that you want to do in life, and now is the time to dream the dream. And from next year onwards, it would be more so the time to build the dream. That's Saturn coming up after Jupiter. So that's your 10th sign. The moon then joins your sign on the 16th, 17th, and the full moon is actually on the 8th, the 19th. It's in your second sign in Gemini, opposite the sun here, Sagittarius. Again, full moon here, activating these houses of values, your values, the other person's values. I imagine that December will be a time for you to get more intimate with someone and to have those conversations that people have when they're in a relationship about values. Now, it could be, of course, anything from discussing finances to intangible values like deeply held beliefs and all of that, where you're really kind of talking it out. But whatever it is, it's about balance between the two, like yours and theirs, whatever yours is or whatever theirs is. Second and eighth sign. So the moon in the second, sun in the eighth in Sagittarius. And again, because your ruler Venus is about to move back into the eighth, you're going to be really focusing on the others a lot. So any kind of other, that would be really the focus for the next many weeks. So I want to bring it forward then to finish off the month and to show you that configuration that occurs. Again, Venus and Pluto come back together when it's retrograde, the end of the month. And then Mars, as the moon meets with Mars again on the 30th, 31st, then we have Mars conjunct the eclipse degree. And the 31st, therefore, New Year's Eve, is a potential trigger in your relationship. So be mindful of being triggered in any way, I would say, for New Year's Eve. Moon here, conjunct Mars-Ketu, and the eclipse being triggered. Mercury conjunct Pluto in your 9th, your Lord Venus retrograde in your 8th. This is a potential for some explosive interactions, I would say. And again, it's not your nature to be like that, Taurus. You're not usually roused that easily and into anger, as typically many talk about Taurus being the bull that's slow to anger. But when you do, you do, and that's something to be really mindful of. That you don't get your hooves stuck in and charge. This is important in terms of not burning your bridges, not being too reactive at this time, because it's going to pass. And when it does pass, then you might regret having said something or done something. So that's 31st of December. It's quite an explosive time. You could use it to kind of clear the way. If there's an issue that hasn't been dealt with, for example, and you've been wanting to say this thing for so long, and you really just need to say it to clear the air, and actually you think by clearing the air, your relationship will improve, then of course, by all means, as long as you're doing that consciously and not in this kind of knee-jerk reaction way. That's what this configuration would be best used for, I would say. So Taurus, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Gemini, your ruling planet Mercury is currently transiting Scorpio and will be transiting Scorpio on the 1st of December. It will move into Sagittarius, and then it will also move into Capricorn. So it's transiting 3 different signs in the month of December, and that can only mean one thing, that Mercury is getting ahead of itself. You are getting ahead of yourself, planning ahead, and that's all good. But it also means that Mercury then will retrograde subsequently, and it will do so by mid-January. So think about December as this kind of need to kind of rush ahead, plan ahead, all of that, all very well. But as long as you're open-minded to the fact that you will be rethinking things and redoing things. And in relation especially to things that you cannot foresee right now, because it will retrograde in your 8th sign. So in Capricorn, it is starting out the month of December in Scorpio. It will then zoom through Sagittarius and finish up in Capricorn. So 6th sign Scorpio is very much activated right now as well because of the new moon. And I'll show you that. It's on the 4th. So it's a very special new moon. It's an important new moon because it's a total solar eclipse. So you can see here, sun, moon, south node Ketu, and Mercury very closely conjunct the sun. So the eclipse is at 18 degrees in Scorpio, and Mars is just about to join them later on the day. And so there's a lot of emphasis therefore on Scorpio, which is your 6th sign. So there's a need here to really dig deep to overcome any kind of challenges that you've been facing in life. 6th sign is very much about having the strength when Mars is involved, especially having the strength to overcome your weaknesses. 6th sign could be like a bad habit, a routine that's not really efficient in your day-to-day life, a health issue that you're having to overcome, whatever it is, or somebody that you're having to deal with. You know, it can oftentimes be projected onto other people where we see the other as an enemy, where really they're just reflecting our own inner demon, our own whatever we've got going on in us. And that's why 6th sign rules enemies, for example, or co-workers and things like that, people we have disagreements with, all of these kinds of things. So it's important here to kind of reset the whole dynamic and recognize it as an inner thing. It's like it's all inside you. And this is especially because of Ketu, the south node in Scorpio, and Mars joining it in December and triggering it in a big way by mid-month, and also by the end of the month when it then transits the eclipse degree. So Mars is like setting a light to all of these potentially volatile experiences. So this is especially important for dealing with any co-workers or any subordinates in any way, dealing with any person that you see as an enemy in any way. I would even maybe think about, yeah, you need to obviously overcome the issues. But again, if you're not dealing with the internal issues and thinking that it's all about them, then the issues really aren't really dealt with. It is going to challenge you to deal with them as well. And that's what Mars does in Scorpio. But this new moon and total solar eclipse on the 4th of December is a major reset in terms of all of these issues. And, you know, it's important, obviously, then, therefore, to really slow down on the new moon, pay attention, to withdraw somewhat, which is what new moons are all about anyway. But because it's a new moon in Scorpio, where the moon is at its weakest, it's definitely a time to withdraw and slow down and pay attention to your emotional nature, your the possibility of having a knee-jerk reaction to someone who you see as a threat or as an enemy or as a block or obstacle in some way, and getting triggered by that. So try and, you know, not be too reactionary, I would say, to anyone at this time. And if you can, you know, just, you know, have that awareness in your mind going into any kind of situation, especially around the 4th, leading up to the 4th, but also some days after the 4th of December. And really the whole month is, if I show you this, so Mars goes in on the 5th, the whole month is set up for kind of like some like potholes really in the road, because Mars conjunct Ketu on the 14th, 15th, and then conjunct the eclipse degree on the 30th, 31st. They are major red flags for being triggered in some way and having some sort of disagreement. But again, if you channel it in a very positive way, you can see that Mars is about clearing the road. It's like clearing any blocks that you have. And that's a better use than, again, having an argument with someone where it's just not going to go anywhere and you're just creating more issues anyway. So this is what Mars in the 6th is best for. It's about tackling issues, personal issues. Ketu is about dealing with past issues. It might dredge it up for you to be able to kind of completely get rid of it. And Mercury in the sun here, of course, as well, you know, being able to communicate from this place, being able to have that tough conversation, maybe that you maybe have to have with yourself first before you have with someone else. Now, on top of that, we have Venus, which is beginning the month in your 7th sign, entering your 8th sign, and then will retrograde later on in the month as well. So you're having to add in this kind of dynamic here where engagement in any way and how you're relating to others has to be looked at more closely, because Venus will return to Sagittarius and spend most of its retrograde in January in Sagittarius until 29th of January. It will start it in Capricorn, but spend most of it in Sagittarius. So really looking at reevaluating, who you love, why you love them, how you express that love, and do you feel that love back from them? Do you feel appreciated? Are you appreciating the other? What do you need to sacrifice for the people or the things that you love, whether it's tangible things, physical things, or intangible things? These are all questions that you'll be asking. And in terms of Venus and Sagittarius, it's about having more meaning and purpose in your engagements. And of course, because Venus is your 5th and 12th house ruler, it's about sacrificing something for the one you love, whether it's a child, whether it's a partner, a lover, whether it's a creative endeavor, whatever it might be. There's something that you have to sacrifice, and you'd only do so if you find it meaningful. So Venus retrograde towards the end of December, it begins retrograde on the 19th. And again, for the next few weeks then until the end of January, is asking you to really look closely at these things. So let me bring it forward a bit more, and we'll see how Venus has on the 8th entered Capricorn, where it will conjunct Pluto. And this is actually very closely where it will retrograde also. So it's going to stay with Pluto a long time. So in terms of your children, if you have any, in terms of your creative endeavors, any kind of a creative self-expression, any projects you're working on, there could be some hidden dynamics going on here and some power struggles that you might have to deal with over the coming weeks and months, in fact, because Venus won't be finished with Pluto until March, because it's retrograding and then it's going back and meeting with Pluto again in March. This is a time to be really mindful of the kind of hidden dynamics involved in these relationships. So whatever future plans that you have at all, again, because we tie it in with Mars and the new moon and the eclipse in the Scorpio and the 6th sign, it's really important to see what the blocks are in you getting what you want or doing what you want, going where you want, being with who you want to be with. What are the blocks? Because it could easily bring up the blocks so that you're aware of them so that you can completely then expel them. So that's the positive side of it, that it's about removing the blocks. But of course, it means that it has to bring up the blocks so that you're aware of them. Another dynamic I want to mention is Moon, you can see here, joining Jupiter and Neptune, which are now coming closer and closer together in the coming months in your 9th sign. And this is actually a very positive transit for you, Jupiter in the 9th, because it aspects your sign and the 5th sign. But it's also maybe a very idealistic place right now for you, the 9th sign. So travel, teaching, higher learning, maybe even a teacher or mentor, advisor that you're placing in this kind of, maybe putting the rose-tinted glasses on, looking at them, where the rose-tinted glasses might be taken off in the coming years when Saturn moves in here. And that's not a bad thing, because if you're idealistic about something, if you have a dream of something you would like to do, a place you'd like to travel, for example, let's use travel as an example of the 9th house. You have this dream of this paradise you want to go to, or whatever it is, or just travel. You have to have the dream first before you make it a reality. And this is what Jupiter's job is now with Neptune, is about making it this dream, real in your mind's eye. And then Saturn's subsequent transit here from next summer, 2022, is about making it real. So that's maybe more short term in terms of travel, but it could be in terms of long term with Saturn transiting here for the next few years, about making real the things that are very important and purposeful to you and meaningful to you. So these are important transits for you, for sure. So let me move it forward, and we'll talk about the full moon, which actually occurs in your sign on the 19th. So the full moon is in Gemini, with the sun having moved opposite in Sagittarius. You can see here that on the 19th as well, Venus has stationed retrograde, very close Pluto, and Saturn here as well in the same sign, in the 8th sign. So there's definitely some obstacles to overcome in your relationships, especially with children or a lover, or any kind of creative, expressive thing that you're doing. So there's something to overcome, some hidden dynamic that you have to be aware of here. And this full moon, and then again, sun in your seventh sign, is highlighting how you're engaging with other people, and what it is you want to do, what's meaningful to you, and what do you value. And again, around the bigger issues of travel and all of that, that would be relevant here because Jupiter also aspects this moon. And ongoing this whole period, remember I said by mid-month, 14th, 15th, Mars and Ketu come together by exact degrees. So that's a trigger in your sixth sign. And then I'm going to show you the other trigger, which is at the end of the month. If I bring the moon down here as it starts to wane, and then moon joins Mars and Ketu in Scorpio on the 30th and 31st. This is a major trigger on New Year's Eve because moon has gone into Scorpio again as it had for the new moon on the 4th of December, but now it's with Mars at the eclipse degree, triggering that eclipse. So this is actually a bigger trigger really than the 4th of December. New Year's Eve is certainly a time to be very mindful. You add the fact that Venus is also retrograde in your seventh sign, Mercury's conjunct Pluto in your eighth sign. You know, there's some dynamics going on here in terms of whatever you're planning for the future and who you're planning it with. There could be some things to negotiate here and to be mindful of any kind of knee-jerk reactions and overreactions and irrational, impulsive reactions at this time. So that's, you know, it is a red flag in the year. I'm telling this to all the signs, but for you, Gemini, because it's your sixth sign involved in this in a big way, the sixth sign is already very reactionary. It's again, the part of you that sees the other as the enemy, whatever other, whoever other. But really, again, if you just recognize that it's actually your own shortcomings, your own inner demons, your own conflicts that you haven't worked out in yourself, that you then project onto other people and have to deal with it through a relationship that gets really messy, really easy. So just be mindful, Gemini, of getting into any kind of power struggles here, which is very possible during the end of the month, especially. And recognize that it's the time to overcome these struggles within yourself. And that by doing that, you know, when you deal with your conflicts, and Mars is very well positioned to do so, you have such a better time of it. If you look at anyone who's like a fighter, who's gone through it in their, you know, training and all of that, you know, and they go into the boxing ring, you know, they don't have any animosity usually after the match. They're, you know, if they win especially, they're elated and they feel like they've overcome something. It's not, they realize it's not about the other person. It's not about the opponent. It's, you know, it's our own inner demons. We have to look at this in a way that we're our own worst enemy in many ways. And during these transits, Gemini, I would say that's something to be mindful of in terms of being your own worst enemy in this kind of conflict situation, this potential conflict situation, which again is something to overcome and deal with. And there's no better time to deal with it than in December. Okay, Gemini, I hope that's been of help. And as always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Cancer, we have a new moon in Scorpio on the 4th. And this is quite an intense time for you because it's in your fifth sign on the 4th of December. This is very much about your future, your plans for the future, your children, if you have any, or your lover or a potential lover, or something that you're working on, a project, a creative endeavor, some sort of a self-expressive thing. Fifth sign is very much about what you would like to create in the future. And there is a major reset going on now with the upcoming new moon and a total solar eclipse on the 4th of December in your fifth house. So this would be a good time to kind of slow down, I would say, and pay attention for this major reboot. What is it that you want to create in the future? What do you love to do and who do you love? And how do you express that love? All of that is because we have, of course, let me bring it forward to the actual day here on the 4th. You can see here that the moon and the sun coming together at 18 degrees of Scorpio. Remember, this is sidereal zodiac I'm working off. Ketu, the south node, is here. So it's a total solar eclipse. And Mercury is not far from the sun and moon, 21 degrees. So it's, again, very much about how you communicate as well. how you feel to the other, whether to a lover or a child or, you know, a potential lover, or how you communicate through your art, your chosen art, whatever it might be. This is very much about how you communicate. And so it's important to obviously communicate that with yourself first in terms of what's important to me. What do I value here? Because the sun is being eclipsed by the moon, i.e., your ruler, eclipsing your second house lord. So that's very much about you, yourself, and your own intelligence, and perhaps even a distorted mind with Scorpio moon obscuring the truth of what you really stand for, what your values are, the second sign. So it's important with a Scorpio new moon, and especially during an eclipse, not to get too gloomy and distorted in your thinking, and that then distorts reality in some way. So just really tap into what is true, what is real, what do you value. Family issues, of course, are going to be a major dynamic here. Second house, money is going to be a massive thing about this new moon and total solar eclipse, because again, your second lord being eclipsed in your fifth house, it's very tied in with money. So again, try and be very mindful of that, to be able to slow down, pay attention, to go within and to do a whole reset around these issues, so that there isn't any sort of reactionary sort of tone starting out the month. Now, the reason that would be really important is because subsequently Mars goes into Scorpio and starts to trigger all of these effects. So it's like you know, a match that set off all of these kind of volatile situations that are building in December. And so major periods of volatility and things potentially getting triggered are mid-month on 14th, 15th, leading up to that period, but also leading up to 30th, 31st period, when Mars then subsequently transits the eclipse degree. Really, for that reason, the whole month of December is a major trigger point where it could easily explode. You, for example, you know, having that crossword with your child, it might be as simple as that, or with your lover, or getting into a heated debate about money with your family, and you want to do this, and they don't see the value in that. Whatever it might be, it's about what's important to you, what you love, and what you love, not anyone else. Fifth sign is very much about what you love, and other people might not see it that way. So the first trigger, as I said, is in the middle of the month, and I'll just show you that. It's on the 15th and 14th and 15th of December. So here is Mars conjunct Ketu, the south node, both very powerfully placed, but both setting something off here. And this is a potential trigger for any kind of overreaction, knee-jerk reaction to all of these dynamics in terms of things that are important to you. And because they're so important to you, it means that you could so much easier get triggered. So just be mindful of these triggers, these times especially, and that again throughout the month really, and that so you don't get, you know, wrapped up in it all, I would say. Another thing that's developing as well is that Venus is, having started the month in Sagittarius, it's gone into Capricorn from the 8th, and it's conjunct Pluto. But not only that, a few days time on the 19th, it's going to actually retrograde on the full moon. The full moon in Gemini, you can see here, Venus retrograde. There's a line under it here. Now, Venus retrograde very closely conjunct Pluto in your 7th sign. When we add the fact that Mars is very close with Ketu and triggering the eclipse in your 5th sign, this is all very much about relationship and children and partner. Or any other, you know, so if it's not a child, like I said, it could be a lover. But if it's not a lover, then it could be a creative thing you're working on. You spend your energy somewhere. You want to put your energy into something. The 5th house is that thing, the thing that you love to do. The partner, the child, the creative thing, whatever it is. And when you add the fact that Venus is now conjunct Pluto and Saturn is there, and Venus is retrograde in your 7th sign, there's so many things that are important here for you, that you could so easily get into an issue with your partner or with your child or with any other around these things that you want to do. And there's a whole reset now happening, of course, because of the eclipse. but there's also a reset happening in terms of Venus retrograde. It will start off in your seventh sign. So it's about reevaluating how you're engaging with your partner, what makes you happy and in your partner, what do you want to gain from your partner, any kind of engagement. And then it subsequently moves into your sixth sign. So there might be some conflicts to deal with, some things to mitigate here so that you're not getting into a conflicted situation with your partner. Because there's something important here for you. Now, when you add the fact that Venus is starting this and coming back to this Pluto conjunction in March, it means that for the next few months, you're going to work out a lot here with your partner, with others. And there could be some things to kind of overcome as well, some blocks, hidden blocks along the way with Pluto, and some power struggles that you have to deal with during this time. So that's something to be mindful of. Venus, like I said, stations retrograde on the full moon. This is a full moon here in Gemini. So the sun therefore has moved into Sagittarius. So this is your 6th and 12th sign. Always good to keep an eye on these two signs where the full moon is to find more balance in these two areas of your life. And the 6th is about dealing with everyday stuff, the everyday chores. If it's a child, for example, then it's about looking after the child. If it's a project you're working on, you have to work on it. If it's a lover, you have to work at that until it becomes a committed relationship, right? All of these things are relevant for these transits, but the full moon is asking you to let go a little bit more because it's a full moon in your 12th house on the 19th. And for those couple of days, 19th, 20th, you know, it's a good time to maybe check out a bit, to maybe try not to work everything out now. You know, there are a lot of things to work out, and there are a lot of important things to work out, but perhaps it might be a good couple of days, especially around this full moon, to kind of step back a bit and to kind of maybe take some time out in some way, have a little retreat for yourself, even if it's just in your day. So that's the full moon on the 19th, and then that begins the Venus retrograde. Moon then joins your sign on the 20th, 21st, 22nd, and then into the 24th moves into your second sign opposite Leo and opposite Jupiter and Neptune. Now, these I want to mention because they're important, because this is an ongoing transit until April, and they both move out of here in April. So it's important to mention them now. And it's not like you haven't been aware of this area of your life, but it just might not be very clear to you. Now, the area is the 8th sign. And Jupiter has now returned to Aquarius and joining Neptune, which has been here since, you know, for the last 14 years nearly. And it's really highlighting, or perhaps obscuring in a way as well, the 8th house issues. And that is very much about joint values and resources. So any kind of issue that you have with your partner around what do they value versus what you value, and you might not be clear about what they value. So this is just going to add to the other issues that are going on, the important things that you want and value and would love to do, and versus what your partner would love to do and values more. And so there's a negotiation having to go on here, and it kind of being more inspired as well, perhaps by your partner's values, and also being maybe, you know, think about it practically, your partner's wealth, maybe benefiting from some other person's wealth. Or if it's not money, literally money, it could be benefiting from other people's ideas. That's Jupiter in the 8th sign. But conjunct Neptune, there's a kind of lack of clarity around those things. And it really isn't until Saturn moves in here from next summer, 2022, and then goes back into Capricorn, but then returns in January 2023 for a couple more years. It won't be until then that you get really clear about these issues and how you're going to work these things out. And so right now it's really more about just figuring them out, just having that kind of open discussion, that dialogue, and being inspired by the other and what they think and what they value. So I'm going to bring it to the end of the month, and I'm going to show you how by the end of the month, we have an interesting dynamic to be really mindful of. Again, another trigger. Now, Venus has retrograde back into Sagittarius by the 30th, but then on the 31st, you can see here, 30th and 31st, Moon is with Mars and Ketu, and conjunct the eclipse degree on the 31st. Now, this New Year's Eve is highly volatile, let me put it that way. But as long as you're mindful of that and you don't get into any kind of power dynamics going on, you can see Mercury and Pluto conjunct here in your 7th as well, and Saturn here in your 7th. You know, I wouldn't get into any kind of tussle in any way, over the dinner table if it's a New Year's Eve party or anything like that. Fifth house, being triggered here in this way with Mars here, a major trigger, like setting it alight. I would say really try and be as quiet as possible for this New Year's. I'm saying that to all the signs, though. It's nothing, I'm saying to you in particular. But again, realizing that it's in your fifth sign. So if it's your child, that you don't react or they react to something, for example, or if it's your lover, whatever it is, whoever it is, just make sure that you are mindful of this potential kind of volatility on New Year's. So Cancer, an interesting month ahead for sure. Definitely some roadblocks, some issues to work through, but also a lot of strengths available there with Mars and Scorpio to deal with the issues, to get past them, and to deal with your whoever it is in your life, the nearest and dearest. So I hope that's been of help. And as always, I'm going to wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Leo, the sun, your ruler, is in your fourth sign, Scorpio. It's all about the home and happiness. And it's about to be eclipsed, a total solar eclipse on the 4th of December. You can see here, the moon is starting the month in Libra, and then will join the sun and eclipse the sun on the 4th in Scorpio. Now, I'll bring it forward. You can see here, it's at 18 degrees of Scorpio, where the moon will join the sun, and Ketu, the south node, the south eclipse point, with the north eclipse point in Taurus in your 10th sign. So this is very much about something getting triggered, something needing to be reset, rebooted in your home. And this is going to be a potential trigger in the weeks to follow, actually, because Mars will then subsequently move into Scorpio the day after, and then it will trigger the eclipse by the end of December, really. So the whole month of December is like a potential trigger leading right up until New Year's Eve in your home. So Leo, I would be very cautious, mindful of any kind of potential triggers in your home environment in any way that, whoever it's with, because there's a potential here to be with, a sibling, for example, is one thing for sure. It could be, with anyone, though, in your home environment. And also it's going to have an impact on your work as well, because this working from home dynamic that's going on and will probably, kick in more as well over the winter months. This is something that could lead to further potential like strain in many ways. So the sun, your ruler, being eclipsed by the moon, the 12th, it's not very easily accessible. The 12th sign is the things that are hidden from you, like it's your own subconscious, but it's also projection onto others, those who you seem or you see as maybe an enemy, but you don't see them as an enemy necessarily because it's hidden. 12th house is hidden. So that's why the 12th house is often referred to as hidden enemies. But it's like, what good is that to you if you don't know that they're your enemy, right? Well, it's really your own inner self. It's your own saboteur, in other words. So the moon is your saboteur, and it's transiting, eclipsing, distorting yourself. So this is the potential for a distortion. And obviously with the eclipse, any eclipse, a solar eclipse, especially Leo, it's important to be mindful of any kind of distortion of the truth of who you really are and your own vitality and confidence. And there's nothing that can knock confidence than a saboteur, right? So the moon, which is your saboteur, is in Scorpio, where it's debilitated. So it's not only that, it's a distorted, it's like a gloomy, depressed mind, completely distorting reality and, tripping you up and undermining your confidence in who you are and what you're doing. And this is especially going to play out in your home environment and what makes you happy. So just be mindful of these kinds of triggers in December, I would say, because again, as soon as Mars joins Scorpio, it's going to start triggering it in a big way. So the first major trigger is by mid-month, and then another major trigger by the end of the month, when Mars first transits Ketu mid-month, and then transits the eclipse degree on New Year's Eve. But all along, that is going to be a major trigger. Another thing that's happening is that Venus is actually going to conjunct Pluto, which is also associated with Scorpio. And it's going to do so beginning in your 6th sign. And so if I show you here from the 8th, Moon is there as well. Venus joins Pluto, Moon and Saturn here all together in your 6th. As this is occurring and Mars and Ketu are coming together and Venus is actually going to retrograde from the 19th, this is also a potential trigger. Now, the 6th house is about, unlike your 12th house, which is like hidden enemies, the 6th house is very much open enemies. That's how it's seen. But again, it's just your own inner demons. If the 12th house is your saboteur, your hidden enemy, the 6th house is very obviously those things that you do that are really not good for you. So the 6th house is bad health habits, bad routines, not living a very efficient, healthy lifestyle. Any kind of day in, day out kind of stuff is 6th house. So it's the things that you do that actually create the problem, whether it's health issues or work issues, colleagues at work that you're not getting along with, subordinates, maybe people who work for you who you don't get on with, or again, it's just someone you see as an obstacle or in any way, an adversary in any way. So of course, this is going to then highlight these relationships in a big way because Saturn is already putting the pressure on for you to actually make some changes here, positive changes. And now that Venus joins Pluto here, it's asking you to really look at, well, what is it you want? And is that really good for you? What do you want to do? Because Venus is your 3rd and 10th Lord. So it's very much about what you like doing. And put Venus in the 6th house, and then you have to really question, well, actually, do I really want this? And is this ever going to be enough? And Venus Pluto on top of that then is a lot of kind of questioning, well, what are my hidden motives here? And if you don't question those hidden motives, you could again experience this as a relationship where there's some sort of power struggle going on, where you're perceiving the other person as the block. You're not giving me what I want, or you're the enemy, you're the bad guy, whatever it is. All of these things could easily be worked out within yourself. All of these conflicts could easily be more easily worked out within your own being. And then you don't have to project them onto other people and have conflicts that will just lead to more and more conflict. So this is the potential in December. The potential is for you to overcome your weaknesses, bad habits, daily routines that are just not working for you anymore, things you're doing that are just not helping at all. And to deal with things in your home environment that will facilitate that as well. So it's like, are you, having to exercise at home? Are you, or just sitting on the couch all day? That kind of thing. It's tied in with your home environment as well because of the planets involved here. So that's the 8th. Venus moves into Capricorn conjunct Pluto. So there are going to be some hidden dynamics going on for sure. Now, thankfully, there are some nicer transits going on for you, Leo, and that is Venus, or Jupiter has now settled into Aquarius. Moon joins it then on the 9th and 10th. And it's joining Neptune as well, which has been here for nearly 14 years. And this area of your life has been, rosy, I would say, in one way. Or perhaps another way to say is that you might have had rose-tinted glasses on as well all this time. But Jupiter now is giving a more idealized version as well of this, a more meaningful exchange with others. So the 7th house is what's activated here. So relationships are the key. Now, there's a big dream here that you have, an aspiration that you have in your relationships, or any relationship, like a significant relationship especially. And Saturn's subsequent transit here next summer, and then it will back out of here, but then go back in January 2023 for the next couple of years. That will be a time where it's about making these dreams a reality, because now it's just a dream, perhaps, especially if you're single. This would be an opportunity to meet someone, for example. But, you can meet someone, that's easy enough, but then actually you have to work on the relationship and you have to commit. That's Saturn's job. So first comes Jupiter, the dream, the inspiration, the aspiration. Then comes Saturn, the hard work, the commitment, the dedication. So these are positive transits ultimately, because Saturn is very strong in Aquarius in your 7th sign. And it will ask you to take a good, long, hard look at your relationships as well. And maybe take the rose-tinted glasses off as well, and to look at your partner realistically and truly, and not have this kind of rosy image of someone that actually might be beyond that, might be really completely distorted. Neptune can sometimes completely distort, like completely take the focus so that it's completely blurred. And so you're just looking at someone through these blurry vision eyes, and it's not going to be helpful for anyone long term to keep doing that. There has to be sort of a need to look at the reality of the relationship of the other, and also of yourself, because of course the other is a reflection of yourself. So these are bigger themes. I just thought I'd mention them now. These are ongoing. These will continue for some years now. In the next few years especially, will be highlighted. But Jupiter's transit here again right now and for the next few months until April 2022 is really an opportunity, I would say, an opportunity to connect more with your partner or with others in general. So let me move it forward, and we can see the moon as it begins to wax and build in strength. And then is the full moon on the 19th, on the day that Venus retrogrades in Capricorn, your 6th sign. Now, full moon in your 11th sign, Sun, your ruler, has moved into your 5th sign at this point from the 16th. That's highlighting these, 5th and 11th, and very much about what you want to do in the future. Your personal dreams and your bigger aspirations and ambitions, and how do you find balance between the things that you want to do personally for yourself and what you want to do on a bigger scale with other people, for example. This full moon will highlight that theme. But at the same time, you have this Venus retrograding and conjunct Pluto, remember, on the 19th, and in your 6th sign. And Venus doesn't like to be in the 6th sign because it's getting bogged down in the details and having to deal with the everyday chores and things like that. So just be mindful in your relations and at work, especially, and how you're engaging with people at work, and that there aren't any kind of, again, conjunct Pluto, there could be some sort of power struggles going on that, nobody ever says, but then there's like a conflict that's building, and that's something to be mindful of all month, really. And especially as I show you now with Mars on the 14th and 15th, actually was the first trigger with Mars and Ketu exactly conjunct, but really, and also Venus Pluto exactly conjunct at the time as well. So that's all the trigger. But then at the end of the month finishes leading up to the 30th, 31st, with the moon waning into Scorpio once again, joining Ketu and Mars again. As you can see here, now Mars is at the exact degree of the eclipse and moon has joined it again. Venus has returned to your 5th sign, which is a better position for Venus, but it's still retrograde. So it's about you working these things out in terms of what you want to do in your work, especially. And at the same time, this Mars is a trigger in your 4th house in the home. So while you're trying to work all of these things out in your professional life and in your everyday life and your health routines and regimes and everyday chores, there could be some potential in terms of something triggered at home because you're dealing with all of that at work. And many people these days work at home. And so it's bringing all of that thing home. And that could be a potential trigger as well. So this is New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve is very explosive. And I would say, Leo, if you are at home having a house party or whatever, just to be mindful of how you're dealing with other people who could be triggered. You throw alcohol into the mix here and it's just highly volatile. It's like pouring alcohol onto the flames. So I don't want to be over dramatic about it, even though that's the nature of Leo. But at the same time, it's worth checking how you're feeling at this time, because it's a debilitated moon with Mars-Ketu and the eclipse, and all of that kind of really churns things up, and you can get really into really knee-jerk reaction states where you say something or something happens where you just regret it later. And all of the while you can see Mercury, Pluto conjunct, Venus retrograde, moving back towards the sun in the 5th. There's a lot of potential triggers here, but there's also a lot of rewards when you overcome the issues. That's the key thing here with Mars very strong and Ketu, both really strong in Scorpio. So there's some things to overcome here, for sure, some blocks, but by overcoming it, you really can improve your life. Because the best thing about these transits is that it's about overcoming things. Saturn does well in the 6th house. Venus is better placed in the 5th house into the end of the month and in January. And Ketu and Mars, although in a way it's going to challenge the home environment, there has to be some changes that have to happen in your home. There's something going on there, and maybe that you can't even see from the beginning of December. But by the end of December, you'll realize that there's something It's something that's going to be pushed out into your awareness that you have to deal with. That might be the hardest part of the month in terms of how it makes you feel, Leo. So, but if you overcome the issues, then there's nothing stopping you, put it that way. Okay, Leo, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Virgo, your ruling planet Mercury is moving through Scorpio at the beginning of the month. It then moves into Sagittarius from the 10th of December, and then quickly moves into Capricorn by the end of December. And so it's moving through 3 different signs in December, which can only mean one thing, which means Mercury is getting ahead of itself. You're getting ahead of yourself, and then eventually you have to backtrack. And that's what will happen in January, of course, when Mercury starts to retrograde. So every time you see Mercury do that, kind of moving through 3 signs in 1 month, you know that that's about to happen. And that's okay, because you can still move forward and plan ahead and get ahead of circumstances. All of that's fine. You can see the sun is going to be left behind now by Mercury. They came together just a few days ago. And so Mercury moving ahead of the sun now, and it kind of gets snapped back in alignment with the sun. It can't ever go more than 2 signs away from the sun. So that's why the retrograde will come up in January in Capricorn. That's your 5th sign, but it starts the month off in your 3rd sign. And so what are these signs? These are important in terms of its transit for the next few weeks now, in December at least. 3rd, 4th, and 5th is all about what you want, basically. And what you want sometimes means having to fight for what you want. And this is where I'm going to bring in Mars, because Mars rules Scorpio, and Mars will move into Scorpio by the 4th of December or into the 5th, depending where you are, on the eclipse day. So if I show you the 4th of December, which is the eclipse, at 18 degrees of Scorpio, the moon eclipses the sun totally. So it's a total solar eclipse in your 3rd sign, and Mars then subsequently moves into Scorpio and joins then Ketu, the south node, and the eclipse degree by the end of December. There's high potential for getting triggered in December, Virgo, because 3rd sign is very much about fighting for something you want. 3rd sign is all about your ego defenses also. So Mars does well in the 3rd because it really fights, but it can also mean that you're going to be just getting into fights. Now, it doesn't mean that's fisticuffs, but it could mean just you're fighting for something you really want and it's important to you and you want to make it happen. And you have to be mindful in terms of how you're engaging with other people. If you're gathering around a dinner table at Christmas time with siblings, for example, that would be a real trigger. So that's definitely potential for arguments, because Mars conjuncts the eclipse degree on the 30th and 31st. So into the New Year's Eve, I would certainly be mindful, but right up into that period, the whole period in December, I would say, from the 5th of December, really, are all triggers. Now, before that, there is the new moon and the total solar eclipse on the 4th. So this is a reset in and of itself. And actually, to ask the question, what is it that I want? Before you might fight for what you want, you have to figure out what you want. So this new moon is a kind of reestablishing what's important to you, what you need that will make you happy. Because the 3rd sign then leads to the 4th sign, which is all about happiness. And the 5th sign is about expressing that happiness and love to someone else or to something else. The 5th house oftentimes for people is about creating something other than having a child or having a lover. But it's all of those things. It's anyone you love. But to love anyone, you have to first of all figure yourself out, and then what would make you happy, and then share that happiness with others. So this is the process, really, in other words, in the next few weeks, with Mercury moving through these 3 signs and starting with the 3rd sign with the new moon. And Mercury is quite closely conjunct the new moon, so it's an important part of it. It's like figuring it out. That would be very much a part of it, Virgo. I need to figure this thing out. What is it that I want? And how do I communicate what I want is another big part of this 3rd sign. Versus 9th sign about what actually I'm trying to figure out what it is I believe. And I'm not really sure what I believe because I'm getting so many different opinions here, is another possible dynamic. So this new moon, again, eclipsing the sun in your 3rd, is about really checking in with yourself on not just about what you want in terms of the short term, but also very much the long term, because the moon is your 11th lord. So it's very much about your long-term goals, but how sometimes your long-term goals and aspirations can or cloud over your clarity around issues that, with the sun, it's very much about the truth of your being. And because it rules your 12th sign, the 12th house is very much about, the truth of you are beyond the physical form, really. It's the truth of you when you are asleep, when you're in deep meditation, when you're, in that kind of state of like a transcendental state is the 12th house. So that kind of truth can be overshadowed by your ambitions, by your desires and your wants and needs, with the 11th Lord moon eclipsing the sun in your third, and then Mars again subsequently moving in. So let me show you Mars from the 5th here, and you can get a good picture of it here. So Mars is first going to conjunct Ketu on the 14th, 15th, and then will conjunct the eclipse degree at 18 degrees on the 30th, 31st. So really the whole month from the new moon on the 4th right through the month is a potential trigger with Mars. But again, like I said, Mars is strong here. So it's about having the strength to go for something you want. But it's just, you have to be mindful that you might rub some people up the wrong way. When we add the fact that Venus, which starts the month out in your 4th sign in a nice peaceful place of the home, that's all nice. Then it goes into your 5th sign, also very nice, on the 8th, except for that it's conjunct Pluto and it's about to retrograde from the 19th. So you see here, the moon has joined Saturn and Pluto and Venus now in your 5th sign. And now it's not just about what you want, but it's like what you love, what you dearly love, or who you dearly love. And Venus conjunct Pluto here and about to station retrograde, very closely conjunct Pluto, is about reevaluating the things that are important to you and that give your life meaning, and those people who are important to you and give your life meaning, and the power dynamics that might be involved in that, with Pluto involved in it now, could show, together with this Mars-Ketu combination here in Scorpio, could show some triggers. So it's like if something feels threatened in any way, that the thing that you love or value, or even practically like money or anything that feels in any way threatened, you could easily get up in arms about it. You could easily get triggered. There could be a lot of irrational responses and knee-jerk reactions to certain situations. Now, you might say that some of them are justified, but it's worth noting these dates so that you don't get too triggered, so that you can respond appropriately and not overreact to situations, I would say, Virgo. And then you'll be able to deal with the situation with more clarity anyway, and try and center yourself, I would say, more than anything in December, because Ketu is the center that holds, even when all around seems busy and chaotic. And, even in an argument, you can have a center, a still center, while even having an argument or a crossword with someone. So again, I would be very mindful around any kind of engagement with siblings, in particular, the 3rd sign. Also neighbors, siblings or neighbors, anyone kind of around your vicinity basically is 3rd sign. And especially, again, leading up to the middle of December and also then the New Year's Eve period. Those are 2 major triggers. So another thing I want to mention is the moon joining Jupiter and Neptune in your 6th sign, and Jupiter has settled into 6th sign now. And this is very much about, and Mercury has also now moved into, on the 10th, Jupiter's sign Sagittarius in your 4th sign. This is very much about how your life works every day and finding inspiration in the everyday matters, and everyday routines and all of those kinds of things. Neptune has been here for many years, nearly 14 years. Jupiter joining it can have this kind of effect of like this expansive, maybe also idealistic or even fantastical view of this part of your life. Any kind of work issue, health issue, day-to-day issue, there might not be a clarity around it such as yet. Saturn will move in here though next year and bring the kind of reality, the realness about it, and the, and by that stage as well, Neptune will have moved out. So there'll be this sense of, okay, now I see this for what it is and I can work on this. Right now, it's maybe more having an idea or an ideal in your mind's eye about what is the perfect day, basically. Now that your ruler Mercury also is in Sagittarius from the 10th until the 29th, it's very much about you looking at your home environment as well and how efficiently that works as well, and planning things around your home leading up to the holidays for sure. So then the moon moves on and joins Rahu, the opposite node here. And then it's really around the time that Mars and Ketu come together on the 14th, 15th. So there's definitely a potential trigger here. And moon is then, you can see here with Uranus and Aries in your 8th sign, which is Mars's other sign. This is highly potential for, you know, explosive events. Now, it could be just a crossword you have. You see here, Venus and Pluto are exactly conjunct as well. Or it could be just something that happens. Now, it could also be that you want to go for something and you've been afraid to go for it, and that you use the energy of Mars and Ketu, both strong in Scorpio, to get what you want. So there's absolutely a lot of good in this. But again, as long as you don't beat anyone up doing it, I would say, figuratively or literally. So the moon then moves into your 10th sign for the full moon on the 19th. And this is when Venus retrogrades later on the 19th. The sun is now moved into your 4th sign, the home, and the moon is contrasting that in the career in the 10th sign. And it's about asking you to find more balance, of course, in your home life and work life. So the work-life balance, basically. There's more obviously tipped in favor of the home life and dealing with home and maybe preparing your home for the festive season and all of that on the 19th. And then Venus will subsequently move back into the 4th sign as it retrogrades and really focus a lot on your home and happiness. And what is it that makes you happy anyway? And what is it that you really value? And what's really meaningful to you? These are the kinds of topics you'll be really focused on by the end of the month, but also into the month of January. All of January, Venus is retrograding your 4th. So what is it that makes you happy? Who is it that makes you happy? What do you need to do to make you happy? All of these things. You can see here Venus and Pluto have come back together again, with Venus retrograde now on Christmas Day. So again, with the combination of Mars-Ketu and Venus-Pluto, you know, if you have children, for example, or, you know, siblings, and if you have children and siblings all around the dinner table, this could be a potential for some sort of explosive sort of whatever. Again, if you're mindful of it, you can, you know, assuage any kind of fallout, I would say, that you can mitigate any kind of fallout. And then I just want to highlight the end of the month with the 30th, 31st, the moon rejoining Mars and Ketu in Scorpio as it started with the new moon. And now we have this moon waning again into Sagittarius for the new moon in January, with Venus having moved back into Sagittarius. But this is a trigger because you have Mercury and Pluto together, and you also have Mars conjunct the eclipse degree, again in your 3rd sign with the moon debilitated in Scorpio. This is kind of like, up until now, you might have been able to deal with it all and have it to, you know, get on with whoever you need to get on with to get what you want. But the moon here in Scorpio then could trigger you emotionally. So where you're not feeling 100% emotionally, you know, vigorous, you feel a bit under the weather maybe, or your mood is a bit low, that then further triggers any kind of potential volatility going on here. So something to be mindful of on New Year's Eve for sure. And a lot of people are going to mask this, of course, for New Year's and have parties and drink more and potentially cause even more issues, because it's like pouring alcohol on a flame, you know. So this is, you know, high potential for some fallouts that, again, if you're mindful of, you can absolutely assuage all of these kind of fallouts and not deal with any kind of things like that in a way that's going to create problems, but to deal with it in a way that's going to help you get what you want, overcome any challenges in getting what you want, and moving forward eventually with this plan of action in making it happen. And that's what I think more than anything is relevant for you in December, Virgo. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Libra, your ruling planet Venus is about to go into retrograde in December, and will retrograde from December 19th until January 29th. So December really is like a slowing down, a process of slowing down and moving into this really important transit for you, Libra, because while Mercury retrogrades, of course, it goes through combustion, it disappears for a while, and it transitions from the evening star, which it is right now, as you can see here, when Venus is ahead of the sun in the zodiac. You can see here, Venus is starting out the month in Sagittarius, ahead of the sun in Scorpio. So that means that it's the evening star, and then it must go through combustion, meet with the sun later on in January, and then move back retrograde as the sun moves ahead of it. So the Venus then will be behind the sun, which is the morning star. So basically it's Venus going through this process of transition between evening and morning star. Now, evening star Venus is generally seen as a more kind of congenial Venus, whereas the morning star Venus, when it appears as quote unquote morning star just before sunrise, is seen as more combative in a way. It's, you know, Venus and Venus type activities, for example, which is all about relations, is not as conducive to daytime, daylight hours, as it is to the evening and nighttime. Because for obvious reasons, you know, we enjoy our Venus type of things and bed pleasures more so at night. That isn't to say we can't enjoy bed pleasures during the day, but it's just not as conducive. So Venus type indications, therefore, into the new year are going to go through a bit of a stark change. And this is one of my reasons for predicting that next year has some quite warlike indications when we add it to other things going on. Now, what does this mean for you, Libra, personally? It means that it's starting out in the third sign, going into the fourth and back into the third. So all of January and for much of December, it's in the third. Third is about war. Third is about fighting for what you want, basically. And of course, when we blow that out into a global context, that literally can mean war. But in your personal life, Libra, this can mean, you know, you going for something you want and standing up for yourself to get something you want and having to renegotiate for something you want as well, because Venus will be retrograde in Sagittarius. So although it starts off retrograde in Capricorn by the 19th of December, because it will move in on the 8th of December, it will actually return by the 30th of December to Sagittarius. So most of the retrograde really in January, especially, it's in Sagittarius. It's just a brief period in Capricorn. Having said that, it's an important period in Capricorn, your fourth house, the home and happiness, conjunct Pluto. Your second house, Scorpio, being really activated right now as well. And when we add Pluto into the mix, and the eclipse upcoming on the 4th of December in Scorpio, your second sign, this is something important for you that is really important in terms of your values, but also about financial concerns and something that you want dearly. And again, there's a having to renegotiate with other people and to communicate effectively what you want, basically. And that often means getting clear because of a process of lack of clarity, which oftentimes the eclipses show. So here you can see the planets Ketu, the South Node, Sun, Mercury are in Scorpio now, starting the month. Moon and Mars is still in Libra, about to move into Scorpio too. So a lot of emphasis now on your second sign of wealth, values, family issues, all of these things, speech. So when you add Venus into the mix here and then conjunct Pluto in the fourth, backing up into the third, this is very much about, well, first of all, what's important to me? How do I get what's important to me? And how do I communicate that in the first place? So these are big themes for you, Libra, in December and moving on into the new year. So let me show you the eclipse, first of all, on the 4th. It's at 18 degrees of Scorpio in your second sign, and Mercury's not far away, just a few degrees. So it's really emphasizing this part of your life. And again, this could be family issues, but it's certainly about wealth. And certainly, if it's not literally about money, it's about values. And sometimes, you know, when we have our wealth in any way kind of challenged, Ketu, the South Node, can often show a dissatisfaction with the amount of money you have, perhaps, or the resource that you have access to. But it teaches you something more profound, and really it's about valuing intangible things. This is what this eclipse whole period leading up to this eclipse is about. What is it that's of value to you? What's important to you, basically? when the things that you thought were important to you no longer are, or the things that were important to you are no longer accessible. So the obvious example is when someone has issues financially, and they might have to take a pay cut or something like that, or they might just have to think about these things. Well, what beyond all of that is important to you? What are your intangible values? What do you value beyond physical things, basically? So this new moon on the 4th of December is a reset around these issues, kind of recalibration and thinking about what is it that is actually important to me. And then subsequently, as planets then start to move into the third and Venus will be retrograding in your third, it'll be like, well, actually, how do I get what I want now? If I've figured out that this is what's important to me, and even if it is wealth, if it is more money, well, actually, how do I go about making more money? So that's kind of the process over a longer period. So that's the new moon. It's an important reset for sure in the year. It's an eclipse, and a total solar eclipse at that. So the moon is eclipsing the sun, your 10th lord, your actions in the world and your career is eclipsing your ambitions and your goals and gains in life. So it's important with the moon eclipsing the sun to be very mindful of the actions you're currently taking and how that might in any way skew the reality of the situation. So the sun is very much like about you gaining something in the future, your ambitions, your higher goals, the biggest goals that you have in life, in fact, which is the 11th house in astrology, as it rules, the sun rules the 11th. So it's very much about, for me, I think it's really a lot to do with finances and work in a practical way for you, Libra, because of the 10th and 11th Lord involved in this second sign. That's very much about work and earnings and money saved in the bank. So it is a reset around all of these big issues, basically, Libra. This is especially the case if you're Libra rising. If it's moon sign, it isn't that isn't true, but it's maybe not as true as Libra rising, because rising signs show the actual physical things, the actual, if we're talking about money, but the moon sign might be more about just a kind of more intangible sense that I referred to of value. So that's the new moon. The Mars then leaves your sign. So Mars leaving your sign and moving into your second sign is a good transition in a way, because Mars can be quite aggravating for you, Libra. It's your second and 7th lord. So it's very much to do with relations in terms of family and relationship and partner and all of that. But Mars in Libra is having to negotiate where maybe it doesn't really want to. And so it's the part of you, or your partner being a part of you, the better half of you, as many people say, maybe having to negotiate where this could create some tensions, and this might have created some tensions in the last few weeks with Mars in your sign, but now it's moving out, and it's kind of like this kind of buzzy bee has kind of moved out, where that might not be it, there won't be that annoyance anymore if there was an annoyance from someone else. And it doesn't have to mean your partner either. It could be just any other or any kind of experience meeting with the world where there's something out there coming into your space that's annoying you in some way. So now that's shifting on, thankfully. But what it does mean now is that Mars is about to conjunct Ketu, the eclipse, the south node of the eclipse that created the eclipse on the 4th, and then will conjunct the eclipse degree itself. So there are some definite red flags in the month. And this would be especially in any kind of relations, especially in family and relationship with your partner or partners. So basically, in general, I would say December is a red flag for you, Libra, in terms of, engaging with other people and what you say and how you say it, especially because this is your second sign. So you could imagine sitting around the dinner table at Christmas, that something could kick off really easily here, because Mars and Ketu come together by the 14th, 15th of December. That's a potential explosive period, but especially the end of December, 31st of December, 30th, 31st. This is when Mars actually transits the eclipse degree. So again, second sign, family, speech, values. I mean, something's important to you and you feel like it's been taken away, or it's been threatened in any way, or if you just perceive that it's threatened in some way, you could easily react and really overreact with these transits and say something you later regret. So that's something just to be mindful of, Libra. And despite the fact, Libra, that you're the most congenial sign of the zodiac, you could say, maybe second to Taurus, I don't know. But Libra is very much about finding the balance, you know, and compromise and all of that. So you might put yourself actually as the most congenial. But the fact of the matter is that Mars rules your seventh house. And it's been in your sign for some time now, and now moving through your second sign. This could easily blow up and you have an argument, and then you later regret saying what you said. So just be mindful of all kind of interactions and what you say in December. And it doesn't mean that you don't say what you need to say, because that's the strength of Mars in Scorpio. And it's about clearing the air as well. So that's also positive, and maybe also necessary right now. But again, it's just not burning your bridges, I would say, if you say things that you later regret. So that's Mars in Scorpio. And like I said, they come together by the mid-month, and I'll show you that. And at that stage, you can see here on the 8th, your ruler, Venus, has moved into Capricorn and will conjunct Pluto. And this kind of adds further complexity into the mix in terms of your engagement with other people, because Venus-Pluto combinations can show all sorts of power plays going on that are not very clear to you, or the other person. And, you know, you might feel like there's some things going on at home, some power struggles, some issues. And that's something to be just very mindful of on top of the Mars-Ketu. So you can see here Mars-Ketu on the 14th and 15th are exactly at the same degree, 6 degrees of Scorpio, and Venus and Pluto are at the same degree, 1 degree of Capricorn. So second house, fourth house, these are very personal to you, important issues that, again, if you feel in any way threatened, or again, it's maybe just the perception of this being threatened, that something is whatever under threat, then, you know, you could react strongly. So just be mindful of around the mid-month, especially, and then also at the end of the month, which I'll show you now as well. But before we get to that, I want to talk about Jupiter, because Jupiter is an important consideration throughout all of this, as it's sort of balancing, in a way, the nodes and the eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio, which, as I've been mentioning, Libra, this has been the main theme of your life for some time, this major theme of finances and values and shared values and resources. So having to balance your own, you know, needs with others' needs and all of that, and your money with other people's money, all of these issues have been prominent in the last year because of the eclipses. But Jupiter now is settling into Aquarius, where it's in a much more positive position. So there's much better news to report in December, Libra, because you now have both Saturn and Jupiter aspecting your sign. Now, again, whether this is rising sign or moon sign, this is a more positive indication for Jupiter in the 5th from your sign, because it aspects back to your sign. The 5th house is very much about being more optimistic about the future as well. So having a kind of more hopeful outlook, but it's again aspecting back to your sign. So it takes some of the pressure off, because previous to this, it was Saturn aspecting your sign only. Jupiter wasn't. Now Jupiter is. It's like just a more balanced view. So yes, there's things to deal with and all of that, but Jupiter is also here to lend a hand. So that's much more positive situation. But one thing I want to mention about Aquarius and Neptune as well here, conjunct Jupiter, is, and the 5th sign in general, is this kind of vague notion about your future. That's another possibility. Now, if you have any children or you plan to have children, this is another a big topic here for the 5th house, this hope and dream of having that. So if it's a child, or if it's something you're working on, a creative project, or if it's wanting to meet somebody like a lover, this is all 5th house. Subsequently, Saturn in the coming years will move into Aquarius. So this period now is about dreaming big, you know, having an ideal, and then subsequently Saturn will move in and make those dreams a reality. Whatever dreams can be made a reality, because that's the other side of it. Neptune in the 5th can also show a fantasy that obviously needs to be grounded in reality, which is what will happen subsequently in the next few years. So if you're working on some creative project, for example, or you want to have a child, or you want to do this thing in the future, whatever it is, dream big now, but again, bring it down to earth in the coming years and make it happen. That's what I would say about these transits. So moving it on, then we'll see the moon move through your 7th sign by mid-month, and that conjunction, remember, to be mindful of, and then the full moon on the 19th. Now, the full moon on the 19th in your 9th sign in Gemini and Sun having moved into your third sign at the same time as Venus retrograding and conjuncting Pluto on the 19th is showing some key shifts here by the end of December. Full moon itself is usually a more gregarious, sort of out there social time of the month in general. This one's a bit volatile because of other indications, but it's certainly, it's in your ninth sign. So, and it's in Gemini, very much about, wanting to be out more, maybe travel even, thinking more philosophically, but balancing that with the need to kind of work things out as well, with the third sign really activated now as well, with the Sun and Mercury here. And remember, Venus will move back here in January, and so retrograde here throughout January. So it's very much a big focus on, what it is that you want again, and how do you communicate what you want. So again, you can see it here that Venus now has gone retrograde. When there's a line under it, that means it's retrograde. And that means that we have this kind of interesting dynamic. Now, Venus retrograde usually is obviously a process of reevaluation, personal reevaluation of yourself and, other people's values, and eighth house matters as well. So intimacy, how you express yourself in that way, as well as how you come together with others and bring your joint resources into the picture. So this is very much eighth house matters, and being open to unexpected change is always necessary for a Venus retrograde anyway. But when it's conjunct Pluto, I would say that's even more the case this time around. And just be mindful of, in the coming weeks, I would say, Libra, as well, this kind of feeling of being, going through this process, that you have to give yourself this time to go through this process of combustion and retrograde and reappearance later on in the new year. So that's from the 19th. You'll see here by the end of the month as well that Venus will return to Sagittarius. But I just want to show you the moon then moving all the way down and waning into the end of the month, 28th, 29th, 30th and 31st are the key dates to be mindful of, because that's when moon joins Mars and Ketu back again in Scorpio. Venus has returned to Sagittarius. But this is really the trigger, because Mars is now at 18 degrees of Scorpio, where the eclipse occurs on the 4th of December. And again, this is maybe a time on New Year's Eve to be mindful of what you say, and around family, being mindful around family and with your partner. And when you mix all of that together, family, partner, and this kind of volatility where other people might react very strongly to this combination also, things could easily get set off, I would say. And when you add Venus retrograde as well, everyone is feeling maybe just a bit sort of having to think about whether they're being valued or not anyway. Are they being appreciated? And all of these kinds of things is a bit of a volatile mix, I would say, by the end of December. Just to be mindful of, Libra, and as long as you're mindful of it, you can, avoid any kind of major fallouts. Apart from that, like I said, Venus retrograde is a process of transformation for you, very personal transformation over the next few weeks. Mars and all of these planets in your second sign is about overcoming something and getting clear about what you value and speaking up and saying that as well, without, again, burning any bridges. So overall, it's a strong month in many ways because of Mars' strength. There are many things to tap into to kind of overcome some challenges here. But there are many complexities as well, I would say, Libra. So just try and avoid any kind of adding to the complexity by creating any disturbances within your relationships, because it's not something that you would naturally do anyway, Libra, and it might affect you very deeply. Again, being the most congenial sign and a sign of balance and negotiation. And there are definitely things to negotiate in December. So Libra, I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Scorpio, your ruling planet Mars is about to finish up in Libra, your 12th sign, and move into your sign on the day of the eclipse or just soon after, depending on where you are, later on the 4th or on the 5th of December. So, and it's solar eclipse at that, a total solar eclipse in your sign. With then Mars moving into your sign. So there's so much going on for you personally, Scorpio, in December, such a reset point and a very strong period coming up for you as well because of that. Because Mars up until now has been in your 12th, which is not the best place to put Mars not only is it not happy in the 12th, where it can create some disturbances. The 12th is very much about hidden enemies, but really it's your own saboteur. And so you could kind of shoot yourself in the foot kind of thing with Mars in the 12th. You might end things that you later regret ending. You might do things or say things you later regret. You might have disturbed sleep. All of these things were possible in the last few weeks because of Mars in Libra. But again, it's moving into your sign in a very strong position, coming back home, basically. So there's this sense of a homecoming in a way, a very personal homecoming for yourself, reconnecting with yourself, and to clear any blocks to yourself as well. So I think Scorpio December is such a powerful time for you to overcome any personal blocks that you have. And this kind of sense of coming back to your own, coming back to yourself, your true self. And the reason for that is because Ketu, the south node, is in your sign and has been for the last year. And it's been sort of clearing out and dredging up things from the past to get clear about them and to remove them. And this has been a very strong process for you all year, but it just hasn't been a very obvious process, Scorpio. Now you might say, well, of course, Scorpio isn't obvious anyway. It represents anything that's hidden. So you're going through a lot of things that are hidden within yourself. And this process of Ketu moving through and kind of raking things up and dragging things out and removing them is ultimately a very empowering time for you. And it's really, Ketu for Scorpio is really the only sign that Ketu is that powerful for, because it rules Scorpio. So now you have both your rulers at home. It's like both parts of your being, the more inner hidden strength of Ketu, and the kind of more outer strength, though it's also inner, but it's also very outer Mars strength, which is this kind of force of nature, really. And when you bring them both together back home, this is a really powerful time, to the point where, you know, if there were anything to say about that, to be mindful of, Scorpio, would be to not overdo it. If you were to overdo it, and you like physically even, and just be too exacting in your engagements with others as well, you could really, like, as I'm told many times with Scorpio, as they shoot from the hip. Now, if you do that a lot with people, people might not be able for it. That's just something to be mindful of in your relationships in general. Now, although this is, again, a very personally very empowering time for you, Scorpio, it could impact other people in a way that they just can't handle your strength right now. And that's just something to be mindful of. Again, burning bridges, that I'm saying to a lot of people, a lot of signs this month. Be careful of burning bridges, I would say. Yes, there's things that you need to get rid of, but they're more personal things, and don't like project it onto other people so much where it's then their fault. It's your stuff, basically. Because it's so easy when the nodes are involved in the eclipses that it's the other person's stuff, where it's not their stuff, it's your stuff. The eclipses are shadows, after all. They're our shadow nature. And we so easily reject that part of us and project it onto other people. And then when they throw it back on us, we get triggered, basically. And so be very mindful of getting triggered in December, I would say, by other people, which you might say it's a part of the process of strength. But at the same time, again, you don't want to burn any bridges. So the red flags to be mindful of are, of course, the eclipse itself on the 4th of December. Then by mid-month, 14th, 15th, when Mars conjuncts Ketu. And then by the end of the month, 30th, 31st, where Mars conjuncts the eclipse degree itself. And that is a particularly volatile period because the moon will come back to Scorpio and join Ketu and Mars in Scorpio, conjunct this eclipse degree. I think this is highly volatile New Year's Eve. So just be mindful of all of the engagements that you're having throughout the month of December, I would say. So let me bring it forward to the 4th of December. This is the new moon and solar eclipse. It's at 18 degrees of Scorpio. So the last section of Scorpio, it's a very powerful section of the zodiac. So all about trying to take back control as well. So this is a very major reset for you, Scorpio, in taking back your control, overcoming fear. Because the moon, though, is eclipsing the sun, it's important to acknowledge, a fearful mind eclipsing the truth, and your beliefs, i.e. the moon, eclipsing your actions, i.e. the sun, because of their 9th and 10th house rulership. They're really two really important planets for you, Scorpio. They're called Yoga Karaka in Indian astrology. So they're really important, 9th and 10th lords coming together in your sign. But again, just be mindful of your mind and your beliefs obscuring your what you can do right now, because 10th house is all about taking action and very much related to career as well and your direction in life. So this sense of having a purpose and direction in life is going to be really the key focus for you for this new moon and a reset, as I said. So on the 4th, leading up to the 4th especially, be very mindful of this very personal as well as, again, professional reset. So that's the 4th. Now, the day after, you can see that Mars, your ruler, then moves into Scorpio. And it's going to take a while just to kind of clear the signs. So it'll take a few days. So, and anyway, the new moon or on the 4th is always a downtime in the month. This one is a particular downtime because it's not just a new moon, a dark moon. It's a debilitated dark moon. Again, be mindful of the mind, I'd say, obscuring reality and, any kind of gloomy predictions or thoughts that you have at this time to obscure the reality of the situation. But then subsequently, things really start to build in strength. And the strength itself is volatile for sure because of Ketu and Mars together, but it's still a strength. And if you channel this in a very positive way and you're mindful of not being overreactive or too impulsive, you can really gain a lot from this, Scorpio. Now, this is whether you're rising sign or moon sign, but of course, rising sign means it's a more physical thing and it's in your space more so. So you have to be mindful of this energy and what do you do with this energy now for the next few weeks. But if it's your moon sign, of course, that's a more complex issue because the moon and Ketu can bring up fears, bring up a sense of needing to get rid of something or someone you're experiencing some relationship that is feeling like it's just not there. And this disconnect, that's another moon Ketu kind of combination. But now Mars coming in and influencing your moon as well. This could be, where you do burn bridges. Now, again, it could be that you do have to, and you have to say what you have to say for yourself to be personally empowered. But also just be mindful of whether you do something now that you might later regret or say something you later regret. So just think about the things that you're actually doing right now, in other words, just be mindful of what you're doing. It may be that you have to do it. So that's Mars in your sign, Scorpio, for the next few weeks. So it's a very powerful time for you, Scorpio, overall. I want to show you some other things that are going on. There's a lot going on in December. The next thing is that Venus will move into Capricorn and conjunct Pluto, which in modern times is given rulership of Scorpio, of course, and it's in your 3rd sign. And it will actually station by the 19th on the full moon. So really, and will return to your 2nd sign. So there's a lot here to negotiate with your partner and others in general, in terms of your values and what you want to do. Now, there's a lot obviously to negotiate financially as well, because Venus will return into your 2nd sign and throughout January will retrograde and go through combustion, disappear for a while as the evening star, and then reemerge as the morning star. So there's a whole process of transformation in terms of your financial situation. Now, of course, it's important, therefore, to be very mindful of not overspending in a way, because Venus retrograde in your 2nd sign mostly is showing the potential for you to have to rethink that. Or it may be that you have to spend on something that is really important to you. That's another possibility. But basically, finances and values are going to be the main focus for this Venus retrograde, and how that plays out with your partner as well, or how your partner is involved in that, or their values and how they're wanting to spend money on something perhaps that maybe you, want something else in that instance. So that's just one example. But basically, it's all about values, and that can oftentimes be literally money. So that's Venus. I'm going to show you when it retrogrades in a while with the full moon. But first, I want to highlight the moon joining Jupiter and Neptune. Now, Jupiter now settling into Aquarius, is actually a very nice transit from your 1st sign into your 4th sign. If it's your moon sign, it's nice, but it's not as nice or as purposeful and meaningful as the fifth sign, which is coming up next April. Jupiter prefers to be in the fifth sign of the zodiac, because it also then aspects back to your sign, Scorpio. So from April next year, certainly it's a much more hopeful and optimistic and expansive and buoyant time for you, Scorpio. But this is also a nice transit, a transitionary transit, of course, in many ways. It's about looking at what makes you happy before going for what you want to do and planning your future, which is what the fifth sign is next year. But now the fourth sign is about maybe settling, wanting to be on your own at home, perhaps, or just enjoy company at home in your own environment, maybe even making home improvements, maybe buying a new car, maybe moving house, maybe renovating your house, whatever it is. It's about growth. Jupiter has a growth mindset. And that's especially the case if you're in a Jupiter cycle, of course. But with Moon now joining Jupiter on the 9th and 10th, and with Neptune here as well, it's important to check the fourth house and your dreams and aspirations in this area of your life, because there has been many dreams that you've had in the past many years because of Neptune here for the last 14 years. So Jupiter now here for the next few months, joining Neptune, could show this real sense of idealism that you have around the home and happiness, and what would make you happy, and who would make you happy, and what's important to you. All of these questions are important to ask during this period. But subsequently, Saturn moves into the fourth house, and that's then about actually making it happen. So you can have all the dreams you want, all the aspirations and ideals with Jupiter, but it's Saturn that always comes after Jupiter in the planetary cycles and in this particular transit. So in other words, whatever you're dreaming now of, whatever that would make you happy, dream big for sure, but make sure that you bring that dream down to reality and make it happen in the next few years, because the potential here is really high for Saturn in the fourth house, very powerfully placed in Aquarius, to make it happen. So I would say that this December and the next few months, in fact, are a time to think about these things. What is it that would give your life more meaning and purpose and direction and clarity and happiness? So that's the Moon joining Jupiter on the 9th and 10th, where you might be thinking about these things more, perhaps. Then moves into your fifth sign, where Jupiter, like I said, will move next April. And then let me highlight the full moon, which is on the 19th, and that's when Venus will start to retrograde. So the sun has moved into your second sign. It's been in your sign for the first half of December, and then it goes into Sagittarius for the second half. The sun in your sign is most definitely a great time of year, from the end of November to the beginning of December, a time to recharge your batteries, basically. And it seems odd to think like that in terms of those of us on the Northern Hemisphere where we're going into winter, but that's in fact what it is. It's about slowing down, kind of plugging in again and recharging up. And what is it charging? It's charging your career prospects, because it's the 10th Lord. But then it goes into your second sign, and it's about recharging your financial sphere, because it's second sign, connecting more with what you value. And when you value yourself more, as what this is basically what this is about, then you earn more, that you can save more. That's sun in the second sign. Now, Venus, remember, is going to retrograde back into the second sign throughout January. So it's about reevaluating this financial sphere. And this full moon in the eighth sign is about what other people value and your partner's values and family and their resources and money. And so it's about balancing the two off each other here for the full moon on the 19th, as again, Venus stations retrograde. Now it does so conjunct Pluto, pretty close to Pluto. And leading up to this as well, we have the Mars-Ketu exact conjunction on the 14th, 15th. I should have just highlighted that a few days earlier. So here you can see on the 14th, 6 degrees Mars-Ketu, Venus-Pluto, same degree, first degree of Capricorn. Now this is, and if we see the moon then move into the opposite sign after that, these are definitely red flags in the month in terms of volatility, in terms of how you're relating and how you're communicating, especially the third house. First house, third and seventh house is very much about relationships, going for what you want, stating what you want, but also maybe, again, some power plays going on here. Ketu, Mars, Venus, Pluto now adding to the power play. And so certainly complexities going on here with your partner in getting what you both want, I would say. So negotiate. That's what I would say. Negotiate and recognize the Venus-Pluto combination as maybe a more intense negotiation where it might feel like something is really important to them, but also you have something important to you that you're having to work out between the two of you. Whatever it might be, communicate that very clearly if you can, because it's third sign. So that's the full moon then on the 19th when it actually stations retrograde, Venus. And then let me move it through the end of the month as the moon wanes to the end of the month and New Year's Eve. And I'm going to highlight this, that the 30th, Venus moves back into Sagittarius. Let me just drop this back into, into Scorpio. So Venus moves back into Sagittarius and will remain there until February, actually, and will retrograde throughout January. And here the moon is waning into Scorpio again, where it started out with the new moon on the 4th of December. And this is, again, a red flag time. Now, red flags aren't necessarily a bad thing. You just have to be mindful of them. Certainly the potential here for you to kind of state your case and plant your flag and conquer something, conquer your fears, for example, that's certainly possible. But with Mars conjunct the eclipse degree, 18 degrees of Scorpio, with the moon joining Mars and Ketu again, and Mercury conjunct Pluto as Venus retrogrades back into your second, there's so many things that are important to you here personally that I would be very mindful in your communications if I were you, Scorpio. And again, not burning any bridges, but again, stating your case if that needs be. But a red flag in other ways in terms of potential kind of, when you're going through a process yourself, that you're mindful of how you deal with others, I would say, more than anything at this time. So Scorpio, that's the month of December, a really powerful time for you and leading into a very powerful new year period with Mars in your sign, and Mars and Ketu both in your sign, a real sense of homecoming and a major, major reset for you for the whole year. And thinking about all of the last year, especially and the things you've been working out very personally in private, how these are all kind of coming to a head now for you to be able to externalize and express these things, these changes that you've gone through. So I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Sagittarius, your ruling planet Jupiter is settling into Aquarius. It's taking its time, but it's slowly moving in through Aquarius, and we're joining with Neptune next year. Now, this is really emphasizing the third sign of your chart and what it is you want to go for, what would make you happy. And of course, because that leads to the fourth sign next year from next April. So third sign is very much about going for something. Fourth sign is because it will make you happy. And of course, Sagittarius, there are many things that you have to deal with in the meantime. There are some more pressurized situations, that has been the case for the last year or more, because Saturn is on one side of your sign and Ketu, the south node, is on the other side. So it's kind of like this sense of not being able to maybe move necessarily either. Now we have a new moon and a total solar eclipse in your 12th sign in Scorpio. And there is an interesting dynamic going on in December where a lot of planets gather in Scorpio and also in Capricorn. So either side of your sign. Saturn, Pluto, and Venus conjunct Pluto will be in your second, and you have Sun, Moon, Ketu, Mercury in Scorpio, and Mars joining it soon. So a lot of emphasis on these two areas of your chart, second and 12th. And again, this kind of sense of maybe being hemmed in and in terms of being able to move, literally, even though that's what you want to do because Jupiter is in the third. Jupiter in the third and moving into the fourth next year, which again shows a more positive situation overall, a much more positive situation overall for you, Sagittarius. This is like an interim phase, in other words, and it might feel like you're a bit stuck in some ways. The 12th and second houses also relate to finances. So the second house is money saved, the 12th house is expense. So you have to negotiate these two things as well in a big way. Other things that this relates to are family, second house, and 12th house ancestry. So that would be like a bigger topic. And also second house speech and 12th house silence. So it's like knowing when to speak and knowing when to be silent. All of these kinds of things, whether it's family and ancestry, speech and silence, money, savings and expenditure, all of these things are sort of like hanging out either side of you, kind of pressurizing you in a way to kind of think about these things, I would say. Now, the new moon on December 4th is in your 12th. I'll show you that as I bring the days forward to the 4th. It's at 18 degrees of Scorpio, and it's very closely conjunct Neptune, or sorry, Mercury, your 7th and 10th lord. So relationships, career, business, and all of those issues are involved in this new moon and eclipse and the upcoming lunar month. And Mars will move in here subsequently as well. So it's placing a lot of emphasis on the 12th house. And the 12th house is all about what is called secret enemies, but really it's your own saboteur. So when someone says the 12th house rules hidden enemies, yes, that might be true, but at the same time, it's really just reflecting your own inner saboteur. The kind of things that you do that trip yourself up, basically, because you're not really fully perhaps conscious. I mean, who is? There's a part of you that's unconscious. There's a part of you that's subconscious. And trying to make all of these things, or as many of these things, conscious as possible would be important around this new moon and the eclipse, but also the subsequent Mars transit over the eclipse degree throughout the month, really. Because when you add Mars into the mix, which I'll show you is from the 5th. So what you have now going on after this new moon and eclipse and this Mars is the potential for you to get irritable and not know why you're irritable, end something that maybe you shouldn't have ended that you might later regret. This is another 12th house Mars transit kind of configuration. But at the same time, it is also about getting over something and ending something. So then the question to ask is, well, what do I need to end? What really should I end? And what maybe should I hold on to? This is, I think, what would be an important question to ask during the eclipse and the new moon on the 4th and the whole month, really. So Mars coming together with Ketu, especially by mid-month, 14th, 15th, it conjoins Ketu. Then by the end of the month, 30th, 31st, it conjoins the eclipse degree itself, where we have the eclipse on the 4th, is, you know, the potential for you to be able to clear away and to clear out things, to get rid of things, to end things, to be able to then plan to move forward. But again, it's just being mindful of what it is that maybe you could do with holding on to, not overreact to and try and end very quickly, because this is quite a potential for December, this December, quite an overreactive, impulsive, knee-jerk reaction to something that you're planning. And because Mars rules your 5th sign, which if you have children, it's that. If you have any kind of plans on the go, if you any kind of aspirations for the future at all, really, children are part of that. But this Mars in the 12th now is showing that actually there needs to be some sacrifices made, that you do need to end something in order for you to clear a path to making that happen. Or, for example, you might need to spend money on something to make it happen. And this is what the Mars indicates. So, but again, because these are either side of your sign, and now Mars is on one side with Ketu, and then Saturn and Pluto are on the other, you might feel like really like between a rock and a hard place in December, Sagittarius. So just be mindful of that, that you're going easy, you know, that yes, it feels like that now where there's no way back or forward in a way, and there's no way out, it might seem in a way, but there is going to be, you know, this too shall pass, this will lift. And like I said, in the new year, there's such a change for you in the new year, in spring, especially with Jupiter moving into Pisces, a very strong position in April. And, you know, before then we have Mars moving into your sign in January, and then moving into Capricorn in the spring, conjunct Saturn in your 2nd sign. So there's a lot of power that you're going to have available to you in the coming months. It's just for December, it just feels a bit like stuck, I would say, Sagittarius. So just be mindful of that and be patient with it, and you'll be able to deal with it much better. So let's move it forward. I want to show you other things that are happening. Venus moves into Capricorn on the 8th. It will conjunct Pluto and stay with Pluto for a lot of the month, and retrograde back into Sagittarius, into your sign, on the 30th. and will remain in Sagittarius retrograde for all of January. I'll talk more about that next month, but this is kind of like a heads up for that. Now, Venus is all about how you work and your aspirations in life, what you would like to gain in life. And because it's transiting now in your second sign, conjunct Pluto, and then retrograding conjunct Pluto, there's a lot to negotiate here. And there might be some hidden aspects going on here in terms of your finances that you have to reevaluate. So when we add this into the kind of pile up really of planets in the 2nd and 12th, you're having to, there's a lot of give and take here basically in December and leading into the new year that you're going to have to get on board with, or otherwise it's just going to feel like, you know, you're a bit blocked here. But Venus moving back by the end of the month into your sign, retrograde throughout January, like I said, in your sign, Sagittarius, this is really reflecting a need to look at how your life works day to day. How efficient are you working every day? How, you know, it's that saying, work smarter, not harder. This would be very much this kind of transit of Venus now going through this retrograde. Venus retrograde is combust also. It will go through this combustion as it meets with the sun again in January, and then reappear later on next year as the morning star. So it's currently the evening star ahead of the sun, and then it will come back towards the sun and then move behind the sun and become the morning star. And as it does so and reappears in your sign later on in February, you know, I think this is a time for you to really sort of use the winter months to reevaluate the things that you're doing and your bigger dreams, basically, and how they impact you very personally. So that's Venus. It's a big part of what's happening in December. It begins in December, though, but takes a firmer hold in January. The moon, then, I want to highlight the moon joining your ruler, Jupiter and Neptune in Aquarius, because Aquarius, of course, has had Neptune transiting for nearly 14 years now. So there's this been sort of inspiration, but also maybe an idealism that sometimes could veer into fantasy. And, you know, that's always Neptune's possibility. But with Jupiter joining it now, that could either further expand on that kind of fantasy, or it could be this sense of getting clear about what is your ideal situation. What do you want? The third house is very much about you grabbing what you want. And because Saturn, which rules this, is in your second sign currently, of course, it's asking you about, you know, looking at your financial situation and what actually can you do without, more than anything. Jupiter is about what you want more of, but Saturn is about what you can do without. So Saturn in your second sign during this conjunction and leading up into the new year is about obviously being more frugal or more concerned about saving money to get what you want, basically. So that's a kind of ongoing transit anyway for the next few months. But the Neptune, like I said, is like this kind of perhaps this idealism that could again, you know, verge on the sort of fantasy. But really, whatever your dream is, it's about making that dream a reality in the coming months and years, because Saturn next summer will move into Aquarius, where Jupiter is now, and then will return here in January 23 for the following couple of years. So really, it's about making those dreams a reality, going for what you want and building on those dreams. So I'm going to move the moon forward, and we'll see how by the 14th, you can see here Mars and Ketu have now conjoined by exact degree, as will Venus and Pluto in Capricorn. And again, this is like either side of your sign with Neptune. Sorry, I keep saying Neptune for Mercury. Mercury moving into Sagittarius as well. So Mercury's got hemmed in now as well. And so any kind of plans around relationships and career and general direction in life as well, Sagittarius, I would say, might have to kind of, again, stall a bit. There might have to be a bit of like being, again, literally maybe even feeling hemmed in. So that's something to be mindful of in December for sure. And again, feeling triggered in that as well, that if you can't get out of the situation you're in at the moment and you kind of want your freedom, you know, Sagittarius is all about, you know, movement and freedom and travel, then it could be really frustrating and you could really take it out on others, because Mars-Ketu here in your 12th is a real trigger. And then Venus-Pluto in your second with Saturn here is also a trigger, like definitely some power struggles going on here, as Venus is your 6th lord and the 11th lord. So any kind of interactions at all with friends, with people, with family, with anyone really, I would say just be very mindful of these kinds of triggers that could really be quite explosive. And you might say something then that you later regret, and then you have to take it back. Or you might do something like spend something that maybe, oh, I shouldn't have spent that on that. And, now I need it for this. Those kinds of things would be relevant. And again, because of overall everything kind of coming back to Saturn always at this time, Saturn in the second house is very much about looking at what you value. And sometimes, and a lot of the time, Saturn, when it first moves into the second house, that can actually reduce your values, or your valuables, sorry. So you might, have to reduce your bank account. You might have to spend more. It's already an expensive kind of transit, whether it's second from your moon or your ascendant. It can be quite an expensive transit. So it's obviously important to be, frugal, but not to be fearful around lack, because this is the other side of it. And this is the more negative aspect of Saturn in the second, where you might be too fearful of spending. And that's not good either, because then it's kind of like you stop the flow. And so it's about values. Ultimately, it's about you valuing yourself, ultimately. And when you value yourself, of course, you earn more money, and you can save more money when you earn more money. So these are all of the things that are tied up in this configuration, because of Venus now getting involved as well with Pluto. So that's what I would say. Maybe the saboteur has to be addressed, clearing out any subconscious blocks that you have around earning money, around value, self-worth, so that you can value yourself more and earn more, I would say. So let me move it forward. There is a full moon as Sun moves into your sign on the 16th. Then on the 19th, a few days later, there's a full moon in your opposite sign. So the Sun, of course, moving into your sign from mid-month until mid-January is always the time of year to really recharge. And even though for most of us it's winter time, it's dark, there is at the same time as we light all the lights at Christmas and all of that, it's about bringing light and clarity and purpose and meaning, which is your ninth lord, the Sun. So from mid-December to mid-January, this is a time to recharge yourself for the coming year. Opposite then, on the full moon, we have moon in Gemini, and it's about really being more social, being more engaging with others, and with a significant other perhaps as well, with the partner, but with others in general in terms of business as well, because 7th and 10th lord is mixed in your chart with Mercury there in your first sign as well. So moon opposite now shows this kind of more engagement in terms of business perhaps, but it can also be like a partner, a relationship that you're more engaging now. Full moons are definitely a more social time in the year anyway, but again, it's about you also being inspired personally. Now at the same time, on the same day, Venus stations retrograde very close to Pluto, and this is now with Mars and Ketu still conjunct in Scorpio in your 12th. This is really where you might feel, despite these kind of more social engagements, perhaps by Christmas, leading up to Christmas, there's some power dynamics going on, and there's some issues around finances and spending and saving and all of these things, and family, and what needs to be sacrificed for the things that you value. All of these things are going to be kind of coming to a head by Christmas. Now, when I show you Christmas, so this is Christmas Day, and you can see Venus and Pluto are exactly conjunct, and Saturn is in a square to Uranus at the same time. And so this also points to this need to look at your financial situation and the things that you want to plan for the future. And again, that's a kind of another holding pattern that's going on in December and has been going on all year. This Saturn-Uranus square, 2nd and 5th house. It's like, yeah, I want this thing and I want to do this in the future, 5th house, but this is what it's going to cost, 2nd house. So some dynamics going on here that might feel a bit stuck, because Uranus in Aries is about the freedom to break free from the mold. But Saturn is the mold, and Saturn is really heavily impressing its mold right now, i.e. through restrictions, through, for example, if it were financial restrictions that you want to do this thing, but you cannot because of the money involved, that kind of thing. Or if it's literally restrictions in terms of lockdowns that are, gripping the world again in December, any kind of sense of feeling restricted or restrained in any way could be very frustrating because of the other indications here of Mars and Ketu and Venus and Pluto, all of these things. And yet there's still some hope here, and there's some optimism, and there's some energy and vitality. And I would say, Sagittarius, use December, use the winter months, in fact, to really recharge yourself, to really look within for that energy. And yes, there might be some situations in your environment that mean you feel stuck in some way, but it's not going to last. So maybe use the time to actually work on yourself and prepare for when that lifts, as then Mars moves into your sign. And especially, like I said, by April next year, things are really moving forward in the new year, and especially by April, where things can really feel more optimistic for you. And so that's to think about now, and use it to your advantage right now, so that when that lifts in the new year, you can really kind of hit the ground running, as it were. So let me just bring it towards the end of the month, and we'll see what happens on New Year's, because you can see the moon here waning into Scorpio again. So it starts off in Scorpio in for the new moon, which is, like I said, quite a dark. It's a dark moon and a debilitated moon for the new moon on the 5th, and this kind of sense of not being very clear about things, and you're kind of perhaps these kind of any kind of doomsday scenarios playing on in your mind might be blocking the truth of the matter. That's something to be mindful of as well on the new moon on the 4th of December. But on the 31st of December, Mars conjoins the eclipse degree, 18 degrees, and moon has come back again to meet with Mars and Ketu in your 12th. This is a major trigger in New Year's Eve, and I would say to be very mindful of how you're engaging with others, especially children, if you have children, or any kind of plans that you would like to make and feel blocked in some way. I would say, try and be patient, I would say, for New Year's, because things will work its way out. There's just a period of just this sense of being stuck here. And you could easily get triggered and lash out and regret it later on. So that's something to be mindful of on New Year's. It's quite an explosive one. And again, because it's in your 12th house of loss, of hidden aspects of you, of expenditure, it's not apparent to you. It's the 12th house is hidden from you. It's like your blind spot. So when you put Mars in there and an eclipse, then it's like this thing that triggers you that you feel like you don't know where that came from. So try not to be overreactive, I would say, in December, Sagittarius, and around all kind of family matters and all kind of financial matters and all of that. And then it will move on, and you won't have burned any bridges in the meantime. So that's the month of December, Sagittarius. I hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Capricorn, your ruling planet Saturn continues through your sign. It's in the middle of Capricorn at the moment, a stronger position than it has been of late. So that's a good indication. And it's really Saturn that's been, running the show really for the last couple of years, really. So that's actually personally, a very good indication for you. But that isn't necessarily easy either. Saturn is a hard taskmaster, so it really gets you to look at yourself very closely, but also more objectively from a distance, and see the bigger picture. And so this can obviously create this kind of maybe pressure as well personally, where the Lord of Time, Saturn, asks you to really consider timing, and your time on this planet. Even these kind of really bigger philosophical questions as well can crop up with Saturn. And of course, Pluto has been in your sign now for some time, but it hasn't actually really fully settled into the sign because it hasn't actually left the 1st degree yet. And so as it's further, settling into your sign, as it moves beyond the 1st degree of Capricorn, this also leads to a process of change on a deep, deep level where, you go through such transformations while you're rebuilding yourself and looking at yourself objectively, that it's kind of like it's Saturn Pluto is kind of like a breaking down and a building at the same time. If you imagine that there were like a work crew coming in and having to demolish certain sections while they're rebuilding others, like that it's going on simultaneously, basically, for you, Capricorn. So that means that, whether it's your moon sign or rising sign, it's very much about how you approach life. Obviously, rising sign is more about your physical space, literally, but also your intelligence, how you think, your character. Moon sign is more about how you feel. And so whichever it is, or maybe it's both, and it's very much about you, again, clearing things out, like doing a demolition job on the things that need to be removed and remade, and as you rebuild, basically, as you build up. And so, as you would imagine, like in any kind of building, you would, when you're putting in a foundation, you would really want to dig as deep as necessary to have a good, secure foundation. This is what this Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn is all about. So dig deep, I would say, Capricorn. There's a lot of strength available to you now to be able to do this kind of work on yourself. And that's an ongoing thing. It's remaining here until next May, and then it returns in July. So there's just a brief period where it moves into Aquarius from May to July, and then it stays in your sign until January 2023. So it's moving towards the end and into the new year, and move into the last section of Capricorn, the lunar mansion Dhanishta, which is evenly split between Capricorn and Aquarius. So that itself is a kind of transitionary phase in a way the next year. So 2022 will be the sense of wanting to move forward in terms of planning, building, rebuilding, and building something new and more innovative, with Aquarius especially coming in by the next summer and the year after, especially 2023. And at this time as well, you have Jupiter and Neptune joining in Aquarius itself. And this is kind of like a heads up for next year, but it's also a kind of laying out a plan or an ideal situation that you would like to create in your second sign, Aquarius, because Neptune has been here for many years, nearly 14 years. Jupiter is here now, it's returning here now until next April. And so it's about dreaming big. It's about thinking big. It's about thinking about what you value and thinking about your own values, and your own self-worth and your own self, literally how you value yourself. And of course, this ties in with money as well, and earnings in terms of that are saved. So it's the bank balance, and any kind of resources that you have at all. Actually, the second sign is fixed assets, all of those kinds of things, family, community, any kind of things that are important to you, that make you feel safe and secure, that make you feel grounded. It's very much about, second sign is very much about things that you enjoy around you, that sustain you. It's also about food, being clear about these issues. Now, of course, Neptune represents a kind of a blurry image. Jupiter represents a deep inner knowing, for sure. So there's the potential for the next few months to get clear about this area of your life that might not have been that clear in the last many years. And so this is then the potential that Jupiter and Neptune coming together in your second sign has in the next few months. Being clear about these things, dreaming big, and then making that dream a reality. When you get clear about it, you're more likely to be able to make it happen, which is what Saturn will do when it moves in by next summer, and then finally staying in the sign from January 2023. So these are bigger themes. I'm just highlighting for you, Capricorn, but there's a lot of else of other transits going on at this time as well. And they are that we have, the first thing to note is that we have a new moon and total solar eclipse in Scorpio in your 11th sign on the 4th of December, with Mars moving in subsequently later that day or the day after, and depending on where you are on the planet. So really a lot of emphasis on Scorpio as well as your sign, because Venus is about to move into your sign as well. Mercury will as well by the end of the month. So a lot of emphasis on just these two signs now, Capricorn and Scorpio. And so Scorpio, first of all, it's your 11th sign. It's a new moon, a reset, a major reset, and a total solar eclipse, where there can be some things that line up so you can get some insights. And because the moon ruling your 7th is obscuring the sun, which is your 8th lord, there could be some issues around relationships, or something that lines up for you to be able to see the dynamic involved and how you relate to someone or anyone, and how that might also obscure things for you, because the sun is already ruler of the 8th, and then being eclipsed now in the 11th in Scorpio is showing that there are some things to negotiate here. And when 8th and 11th get combined with 7th, it might be around joint values. You might have having a discussion with a partner, for example, or any other, like with someone else, about what they value and what you value. And there might be some, words that are being said, let me put it that way. And this is especially important to acknowledge as then Mars moves into Scorpio, because it's going to trigger all of these things. It's like the new moon on the 4th is just the setup. It's like you set the ticker on the bomb. Maybe I shouldn't use that analogy, but it is quite explosive. But you set the ticker and then it goes off subsequently. So the subsequent going off will be when Mars conjoins Ketu on the 14th, 15th. The potential is leading up to that. And then also the potential leading up to New Year's Eve as Mars conjoins the actual eclipse degree. So really the whole month of December is a potential for triggers. And so any type of engagement with a partner, with another, with any other, with friends, with groups, especially within groups, because it's 11th sign, and how you're having to negotiate shared values within a group, that's a lot more complex than shared values with just one other person, where it's just the two of you kind of maybe having to work things out. In a group dynamic, there's like a lot of people having to work things out, and this could be really quite volatile, I would say. So just Capricorn, try and be mindful of these potential explosive periods, especially by mid-month and then by end of the month in New Year's Eve. So let me move it forward. I want to show you then the moon joining Pluto and then Venus entering your sign also. So you'll have all of these planets in Capricorn, all of them in Scorpio by the 8th. And so you can see here that there's this thing building up here with Venus now conjoining Pluto, and will retrograde on the full moon on the 19th of December. Now, this is ongoing into the new year, and it will retrograde till the end of January. And so it will return to Sagittarius, your 12th sign, before going back into your sign in February. And so there's this whole process of not only Venus moving through its transition phase, its transformation from the evening star to the morning star as it reappears in the early morning in the spring, and going through that combustion and sort of like and this transformation. But for you also going from 1st to 12th back to 1st, there is this also you personally going through this change and transformation, and how you need to like dig deep into your subconscious and maybe even your dreams, and be mindful of what dreams are being, coming up at this time, so that maybe wanting to communicate something to you important. Because Venus is a really important planet for you, Capricorn. It rules your 5th and 10th. So it's all about your future planning, because 10th is very much about taking action, and 5th house is the future. And, what are you doing in the future, and what would you like to do? And who do you need to bring into your sphere to actually make that happen, and all of these things. So it's like a lot of negotiation that has to take place, that you could then do with being mindful of your own, hidden objectives, I would say, and also your own saboteur involved in this as well with the 12th house. 12th house is often called the house of hidden enemies, but really that's reflective of our own inner saboteur, basically. And so it's the kind of things that we do ourselves that are against our own best interest. And it's about reevaluating all of these things and looking deep within yourself and your subconscious to understand what is it that you might need to renegotiate and compromise over, and all of these things. So a lot going on in your sign, Capricorn, and a lot, of this coming in and out of your sign, as Jupiter has been in and out of your sign many times already in the last year. And so kind of, how do you fit in with everything else? In other words, how do you so I just want to show you some of the potential trigger dates, and they are, we can see here on the 14th and 15th, Mars and Ketu are exactly conjunct. Venus and, let me bring it back to your sign, Venus and Pluto are exactly conjunct. So this is, there's some obviously power dynamics, power struggles even going on here. In any way that you're dealing with other people. If you have children, for example, that would be one trigger. Friends, any kind of work situations, all of these things are tied in with Venus as well, and Mars here in the 11th, as well as it being your 4th house lord. So it's a very personal thing to you. So there's a lot of potential for triggers here in terms of the home situation, groups, friends, partner, children, work, any kind of things like that. These are all kind of things you have to be mindful of by mid-month, especially 14th, 15th. This is the trigger. And then the other trigger is Well, let me show you first before the other main trigger, which is the end of the month, and that is the full moon on the 19th, because then Venus will actually station retrograde conjunct Pluto. So the sun has moved into your 12th sign at this point. The moon is now opposite for the full moon in your 6th sign. So you're having to work out some issues here with someone and reconnect or reevaluate the whole situation. And there's a lot of compromise that's needed here. But again, because it's conjunct Pluto and Mars is still conjunct Ketu in your sign, 11th sign, if you're dealing with any kind of groups of people at this time, I would say just be very mindful of how you work within the group. There's potential triggers here throughout, which could be quite interesting, we put it that way. And, you know, as long as you're mindful of it, you know, you don't get embroiled in sort of any kind of dramas. There's a lot of power struggles that can ensue with Venus, Pluto, and, you know, a lot of hidden motives that you might not be aware of. So then the other trigger, the final trigger, is at the end of the month when the moon then wanes all the way into Scorpio again. It starts with the new moon in Scorpio, and the month ends on December 31st with the moon back in Scorpio. And so this is a major trigger because Mars is now conjunct the eclipse degree. Moon has joined Mars and Ketu in Scorpio in your 11th sign. Mercury now is joined Pluto, whereas Venus has retrograde back into your 12th. So there's so many potentials here for being triggered within a group dynamic or with a friend or with any kind of engagement with any kind of groups. And, you know, around the home situation as well, I would say that's an important thing to think about. That Mercury, Pluto adding now into the mix of all of these complexities, you know, could be a time to be, you know, be mindful of how you engage and what you're saying in all communications and all interactions, because there's a lot to work out here. And because Venus is retrograde now and hemmed in, as it were, between Saturn and Mars, you can see Mars here on one side, Saturn and on the other side, and then retrograde in your 12th house where the sun is now transiting. So there's a lot of emphasis on the 12th house, and that's kind of, you know, it could affect your sleep, for example. It's about having some downtime and some away time. Maybe, you know, stepping away from these volatile situations would be a good thing. 12th house is just taking some away time, it's taking a break. Just tuning out for a while of any of the drama that might be unfolding at this time, because there is certainly the potential for some drama by the end of the month and throughout the month, really. So Capricorn, I hope that's been of help. It is a strong month in many ways. There are many strengths available, including the Saturn and including Mars and Ketu, both in Scorpio, maybe to kind of clear the air, which is probably a better use of the time than being, you know, unnecessarily impulsive and disruptive in any way to any kind of engagements that you have. Certainly a powerful time, let me put it that way. It's just the power needs to be handled carefully and mindfully. And I hope that's helped. As always, Capricorn, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Aquarius, your ruling planets, Saturn and Rahu, continue in their respective signs. Rahu is in Taurus, Saturn is in Capricorn. They're in a trine to one another. That's a more positive situation in one way because they are in a more cooperative relationship to one another. And in another way, it can be quite a disruption to your, I would say, everyday routines and home life, because Rahu in the fourth tends not to want the kind of the usual. It wants kind of something different, wants to shake it up, maybe wants to change something in the house, in the home. Something needs to be done differently, perhaps with Rahu, whereas Saturn wants to keep the status quo. And at the same time, Saturn's in your 12th house and it wants to end something in your life. So when combined with the 4th house, there may be some things that are ending and some things that you need to think about beginning again, starting from scratch in a way, in many ways, because Saturn will enter your sign by next summer. And this is an ongoing transit. They are slower moving transits, and it might feel like it's slow going at times as well. But when Saturn and Rahu are in these positions, you know, there could be some sense of wanting to wanting to go on retreat or something like that would be one good way of expressing this, because fourth house home, 12th house is very much about away time and downtime. So that's an ongoing impact in your chart for many, many months and years, in fact. Rahu continues here until April next year, and then by May, Saturn will briefly peek into your sign from May, June, July, and give you a hint at what's to come the following year in January 2023, when Saturn will return to Aquarius after having moved back into Capricorn. So there's this process now, obviously, of Saturn moving in and out of the 12th into the 1st, back into the 12th. This process of what needs to be finished to then start again, and then to go back and to finish something properly, so then you can start again properly by the year after. So for now, though, Jupiter, who is now settling into your sign, joining Neptune, is a time to think big, to dream big, to have an aspiration and be inspired by something, to be inspired, but at the same time not to be in any way fantastical about it. Neptune shows that possibility, certainly in the last many years, nearly 14 years of being in Aquarius, could show this kind of rose-tinted glasses view of yourself, and maybe not a lot of clarity about yourself and who you are and your role in the world. Whereas Jupiter now joining it could expand on that theme as well, and maybe this sense of like hope and idealism as well, and optimism and for the future. But when Saturn moves in a very strong position from next summer, and then again, especially from January 2023, it's about building on those ideas and ideals. And all of those fantasies, of course, will have to be left aside in order for you to get real and make what is possible happen. So, of course, the fantasy suggests just that if it's just fantasy, it's not ever going to happen. Whereas a reality, what is real, is more important in the coming years. But still, at the same time, right now, it's about being inspired by something. Because whatever becomes a reality later on anyway, it's like it was initially a dream at some point. It was a thought in your mind that you had, an aspiration, an inspiration that you once had. And then eventually it became a reality through your focus. And that's what the Saturn transit, subsequent to the Jupiter transit in your sign, is all about. So before any of that, so they're all the kind of bigger, longer term themes going on in your life at the moment, Aquarius. But before any of that, we can see that there's a new moon and a total solar eclipse in your 10th sign on the 4th of December. So the sun is eclipsed at 18 degrees. So therefore the moon is eclipsing the sun. So the sun, of course, is your partner, is your engagement with other people, is business partners as well as romantic partners. And that is eclipsed by a gloomy moon, because it's a debilitated moon eclipsing the sun in Scorpio. Your 6th house could show that there's something to get over, that there's some conflict that maybe needs to be dealt with, that there's some obstacle, some block that needs to be overcome. And of course, Scorpio is all about overcoming our fears ultimately, but in terms of how you're engaging with the world, especially, that there might be some health issue that you might have to think about, or that your partner has to think about and overcome right now. And that you both have to think about it together and not get too gloomy about it. Like, it could easily become quite a doom and gloom sort of prediction with Scorpio moon. But the best of Scorpio is, again, to overcome the issue, to overcome the fear, to dig deep and find the strength. And that's actually coming in abundance when Mars comes into Scorpio from the 5th of December. So now Mars moves into Scorpio, and then will, by the end of December, New Year's Eve, transit the eclipse degree, which is a real trigger. And in a way, it's quite explosive. We'll see that around the world. But personally for you, Aquarius, this is an opportunity to remove blocks that are in your way in you achieving your goals in terms of your work. So this is all happening in your 10th house. So the new moon on the 4th and Mars's subsequent transit in your 10th is a time to dig deep, find the strength you have within to make something happen, and to clear a pathway to a more successful career trajectory, I would say, for you, Aquarius. There's definitely some strengths here that are worth tapping into. Mars is very strong, as well as Ketu, very strong in their own sign, Scorpio. So I'll show you the trigger points later on. And before we get to that, though, I want to show you how Venus moves into Capricorn on the 8th, and it will conjunct Pluto. And the moon has joined Saturn also at that time. So this is the time we're really going to be focusing on these issues. And for you, Aquarius, it's all about endings. It's all about what you need to, and especially because Rahu is in the 4th, which is ruled by Saturn, and it's something around the home that maybe there's something that you have to let go of that needs to be sacrificed, or there could be some change going on. You might even move home, or might renovate your home, or make some change in your home at this time of the year because of Venus conjunct Pluto and then retrograding from the 19th of December. So its initial transit into Capricorn on the 8th of December is just a hint at what's to come and what you might have to really completely redo, basically, and be inspired to do. So the 4th and 9th Lord Venus, is, and in the 12th, that has absolute connections to kind of foreign travel. And if you're not able to travel for obvious reasons at this time, maybe it's this need to study. That's another possibility. And study in this case will be something more spiritual, philosophical. These will be more highlighted by Venus in the 12th. Again, conjunct Pluto, I think, and retrograde also from the 19th. There's some other issues there, like some power struggles may be going on, some hidden motives. And when you mix career in with that, there might be some fears that you're having to face and overcome in terms of your career, or might be some power struggles that you're facing in your work. But subsequently, Venus will actually retrograde back to Sagittarius from December 30th, and for all of January, retrograding in Sagittarius. And that's very much about, well, what you would like to gain from all of this. And so I would say reevaluating your earnings, all of these things, your aspirations and what your ambitions are, what you would like to gain from any situation, but especially in terms of, studies, things like that, your home life. If you're, teaching, for example, 9th house, that's definitely something to be, reevaluated. So let me move it forward to the first red flag that I think is highlighted in the month, and that is on the 14th. So that's when Mars and Ketu come together by exact degree in Scorpio in your 10th house, and this is the house of action, and it's to do with work. And so very much about looking at, what are you doing, and what maybe needs to be redone and removed, more especially because of Ketu likes to, it's all about removing things more than anything. You can't give anything to Ketu. It's all about taking something away for Ketu. That's a better way of propitiating Ketu. And at the same time, because your ruler is in the 12th, and that's also about surrendering something and finishing something. And now that Venus is also conjunct Pluto by mid-month, your 4th and 9th Lord, that's especially important in the 12th conjunct Pluto, which in modern astrology rules Scorpio. You can see how there's a lot that you need to kind of let go of here in order for you to do anything, in fact. So there's like a clearing out, I think, in many ways. Maybe it's a clearing out of your subconscious, and that there may be something coming up from, your subconscious in your dreams telling you something, or it might be just some nudge that you get, or a sense that you need to, overcome this thing or finish this thing or move on from whatever it is. So that's from the 14th, 15th. You can see Mars and Ketu is a potential trigger, not to, become, especially in work. I would be very mindful of how you're engaging with others at work, that other people could be, reacting strongly to this conjunction as well. And you might face that at work, for example. So be mindful of that. And then let me move it forward to the full moon on the 19th. And that's when Venus will begin to retrograde, very closely conjunct Pluto. And so this is a time to really reevaluate where your life is going and what gives your life purpose and what makes you happy. And again, it's more about what really needs to go and maybe what's in the way of your happiness, as opposed to what actually needs to, be added. It's really more about maybe what needs to be removed in order for you to be happy. So that's Venus retrograde that continues all the rest of December then, and all of January until the 29th of January. And then the next red flag I want to highlight is this. Let me just, leave it in your sign. The end of the month, when we have the moon return to Scorpio, where it started with the new moon on the 4th, and that trigger point is now being triggered in a big way on the 30th, 31st. Mars is conjunct the degree of the eclipse at 18 degrees, and the moon has rejoined Mars and Ketu in Scorpio. And in your 10th house, the house of action, this could be, a trigger, so any kind of career, because it's New Year's, and all of that, it's like a reset point anyway for the year. But because it's to do with your career and the actions you're taking now, I'd be very mindful of being like knee-jerk reactions, being in any way impulsive and doing anything mindlessly. I would certainly be on guard for that you're not thinking doom and gloom, and you're thinking more that this is a passing phase, and that, whatever kind of reactions you're having now are not maybe it's like, yes, there might be some great things for you to be able to channel now and clear and do, and you could really dig deep and overcome your fears and making something happen. Absolutely. As long as you don't, overdo it and react strongly to situations at this time. Venus, you can see, has now moved back by the 30th into Sagittarius. So it's about reevaluating your long-term goals and what it is that would make you happy again. 4th Lord, 9th Lord, and in the 11th now, what you would like to gain from anything that would brings your life happiness and purpose and meaning. And so there's a lot to renegotiate here. And Mercury at this time as well, during this trigger for this eclipse, is also conjunct Pluto, leading up to New Year's Eve. So that itself, again, in your 12th house, is really kind of triggering there. And so it's very much about away time, downtime, retreat, and perhaps that will be a better time so that you're not getting triggered by the many things that could be happening in your more professional life, for example. So it's like, just having some downtime on your own, some away time, and just taking a break, that you need a break at this time. That's probably a better use of the energies than, getting involved in any kind of power plays in the office or whatever it might be. So anyway, that is the month of December, Aquarius. I hope you found that helpful. And as always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. So Pisces, Jupiter, your ruler, has begun to settle into Aquarius now. It's coming together with Neptune very slowly over the coming months, where they will conjoin by exact degree in April, in your 12th sign, at the very end of your 12th sign, before beginning again by the end of April in your first sign. And I think that this is, in many ways, Pisces, a very much a transitionary phase for you, an ending phase of many things in your life, and things that you perhaps were clear about before, which maybe not so clear anymore, but at least they're, I would say, more inspired than they have been of late, because Jupiter has been with Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn, where that's just been unclear and also kind of maybe even doom and gloom about everything. Now it's like, well, at least it's not clear, but at least there's some sort of hope on the horizon. There's some sort of sense of something inspiring me to change and to do something else. And the reason for this is that Jupiter, because it rules your first sign, but it also rules your 10th sign. So really probably the two most important houses in the chart. First is the self, 10th is what you're doing. And they represent what you're doing in life and how the direction your life is going in. And because there has been such a lack of clarity around this, and a lack of hope as well, and a loss of faith even maybe, that this transitionary phase is certainly welcome, but again, it's still a transition phase. And the issue now, of course, is that Neptune conjunct Jupiter could create this kind of illusionary sort of like delusions, even like fantasy in your mind about things, because it's in the 12th house as well, where it's this kind of dreams that can really stir you and inspire you. But of those dreams, which ones will become reality will become apparent in the coming years. And of course, it's not all of them that will be real. It's not all of them that will be realized, yet some of them will. And that's something to be mindful of, that there there are transits in the coming years to suggest that you will be making real many of your dreams that you have right now. And it's just about being clear about which ones you can make real and which ones are fantasy. Basically, that's the key thing with the Jupiter, Neptune, and the Saturn moving into Aquarius next summer, and then on into 2023. So before all of that shifts, and especially by next April, as Jupiter moves into your sign Pisces, again, there's a need to kind of negotiate with the 12th house, which is about clearing the deck in a way. It's about finishing up something, again, being clear or focusing in on what is, again, dream or fantasy, and also a dream that could be made a reality. And getting clear about that is the process over the next few months. So that's the kind of longer term, bigger picture kind of view in terms of what you're going through right now and into the new year, Pisces. But there's something else going on that's more pressing, I would say, in December, and that is the eclipse. So we have a total solar eclipse on December 4th at 18 degrees of Scorpio in your 9th sign. And Mars will subsequently join Scorpio, and from the 4th or 5th, depending on where you are. And this is real like red flag in the month and in the year. And there are a couple of key dates that I'll highlight as we go through the month. But generally, this new moon and reset point and a total solar eclipse, and so a major reset point in your 9th house, is very much about being clear about what gives your life meaning and purpose and what is of value to you, because Mars is very much about what you value and find meaningful. And there's a need to kind of reset your values and what you find purposeful for this new moon. So the thing about the solar eclipse is that the moon is obscuring the sun, and a debilitated moon at that is obscuring the sun in Scorpio. So it could be like a distorted kind of gloomy expectation about the future that could distort and temporarily sort of block your sense of purpose and meaning in life, because it's the 5th lord moon aspecting or blocking the sun, which is your 6th lord. So it's about being, I guess, patient with this new moon, because new moons are a reset anyway, and it's a downtime in the month, and a need to kind of line everything up and understand how things line up, how things tick. But how your mind operates around all of these things, and your higher mind especially, and how you feel inspired by these things. And the 9th house is very much tied in with hope as well, as is your planet Jupiter. And because you're in this transition phase anyway, and we add this eclipse, it could be this sense of, having to be patient with what is on the one hand clear to you, perhaps internally, in a more hidden way, and what could eventually then be made real in a more external way. Now, the external way is the Mars, where Mars then joins Scorpio, moves into Scorpio and joins Ketu, Sun, Mercury from the 5th. So these are triggers. Now, Mars triggering the eclipse can represent, a need to, be mindful of being triggered, literally, having knee-jerk reactions and impulsive reactions to situations. If you're engaging with family, especially your father in particular, that's a relationship to be mindful of, or any kind of guide or counselor or advisor or teacher, that's 9th house. But it's the 2nd lord, Mars, so it's very much about family and values. So of course, these two houses, what they have in common is about money and wealth and values. So it's about, making sure that you're not getting triggered throughout the Christmas period, as that's a high potential. And because Scorpio is about dealing with our fears and overcoming them, actually, ultimately, it can sometimes bring them up, and we kind of could feel triggered, and you could feel triggered in some way about things that you find, if they're so important to you that, any kind of threat to them, or any kind of threat of removal of them, or whatever it is, could lead to you kind of lashing out. So that's something to be mindful of. And even though it's not your nature, Pisces, to lash out at anyone, you could feel it internally all the same and not say a word. And that's important, to just recognize the kind of fear and the unsubstantiated fear, as is many times the case with Scorpio. It's these kind of worst case scenario thinking that we get into that have no really basis in reality. So that's Mars in Scorpio. It's going to be an intense time for sure. Let me move things forward. I want to show you some different lineups here. Venus has moved into Capricorn, your 11th, on the 8th of December, but it will actually station and very close to Pluto and retrograde from the 19th. And then it will move back into Sagittarius on the 30th and stay there in January retrograde until in February, and then it moves back into Capricorn. Now, so this is this kind of Venus, especially in terms of you going for what you want and getting what you want and getting help from others and getting what you want as well. How that plays out in terms of your friends and aspirations and your goals, your long-term goals in life and the work that you want to do or anything that you want to do, any kind of a group involvement at all, there's a need to be mindful of some hidden dynamics at play here. So whatever it is that you want and you have to involve other people in getting what you want, I would be really mindful in the dynamics because Venus is conjunct Pluto and there could be some power plays going on here that aren't very obvious, but are there all the same. And it's kind of maybe it's like someone sabotaging the situation or you sabotaging yourself even, and then getting involved in these kinds of struggles with people. But again, it's not obvious how they're happening or how they're playing out. So it could be just the sensing that. And then subsequently, as I said, Venus will retrograde. So I'll show you that from the 19th. And that's actually on the full moon. So let me bring it forward to the full moon on the 19th. So the full moon is opposite the sun, of course. The sun has moved into Sagittarius, your 10th sign, the highest and most prominent. And it's really highlighting your work and career and the things you're doing in society in general. And what you would want to gain from all of that is the 11th sign. And that's where Venus retrogrades. So again, it's retrograde very closely conjunct Pluto. So there's this need to be really mindful from the 19th of December, how you're engaging with groups, especially. And then as it subsequently moves into your 10th again, how you engage at work and with your boss or with anyone in charge or with governments even in general. And then this full moon is in the opposite, in the 4th sign. So it's about getting more of a home work-life balance, like a life-work balance at this full moon stage on the 19th. So of course, with Venus retrograde, stationing, slow, Mars-Ketu conjunct, and this full moon, this is the time to really kind of maybe take a pause as well, and take some time out at home maybe because the moon is in the 4th house. So that's the time to really kind of ground yourself at home, settle yourself at home because there's a lot of activity going on in your more professional sphere and in the world around you more so. So that's the full moon on the 19th, and then Venus will continue to retrograde. And then by the end of the month, as the moon wanes all the way back into Scorpio, if I show you that, this is another red flag for the month. So here we are. The moon returns to Scorpio where it started with the new moon on the 4th of December. And now Mars is triggering the new moon and solar eclipse at the same degree, 18 degrees. And moon has joined it with Ketu. This is a potential trigger. So in any kind of traveling situation, I would say be mindful of, being reactive to things, other people around you being reactive and impulsive and lashing out. This is New Year's Eve, so people might want to travel. You might want to travel, but there might be some issues going on here, and that this is the time to be really mindful of some volatility. So it's like, getting on a flight and people kind of lose their head because they can't, whatever. I don't know, but just be mindful if you're traveling at all. But also just be mindful of engaging in any way, because the 9th house isn't always traveling. It could be that you're thinking about things more and you're wanting to communicate more with people, and any kind of communication. Therefore, I would be very mindful with the 9th house being triggered, and opposite the 3rd house, you've got Rahu, remember, and Venus, its ruler, is retrograde now in your 10th. So any kind of communications with people and work or otherwise, I would really be mindful. Now, when we add the fact that Mercury is also conjunct Pluto leading up to the New Year's Eve, that's yet another trigger. Mercury is your 4th and 7th lord, so any kind of engagement with your partner, any kind of engagements at home over the Christmas period into New Year's, there's so many kind of triggers going on here that people could easily have a fallout. And again, even though in Pisces it's not your nature to kind of, to have that kind of directness and, argue with people in that sense, because your sensitive, empathic nature, it's still there, and it still could come at you in other forms. and through other people. And if you are not on, I wouldn't say on guard for that, but if you're not aware of the potential, then you wouldn't know how to deflect it maybe, or absorb it, or work it out on your own first before meeting with the situation or whoever who's bringing that conflict to you. So just be mindful, I would say, throughout the end of the month. But I'm saying this for all the signs as well, by the way. It's just for you, Pisces, it's very much playing out in a more professional sense, and in what you would want to gain from the situation, and how you're communicating and traveling. All of that would be really important to be mindful of. So Pisces, I hope that's been of help. And as always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. And until next time.